a lot of the cabinet and their senior people in a bash on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
They all, or Tuesday night. Sorry, they all still think they're doing just fine. They have no idea. Everyone's looking at them, going, "What are you doing? What are you talking about?"
I know. And when you say, "Well, what have you done?" and they go, "Well, we've started to turn around the schools." Well, how do you mean? Oh, actually, well, Bridget Phillipson started talking to head teachers.
We set up a review, and a consultation, and a task force, and just quietly get on and do so. You know what? It's in everyone's interest for this government to actually do well.
It
this
is.
Country is in a dire state.
I'm quite enjoying it. Not doing well, though.
There is that.
I do like that.
And we did say it wouldn't.
But when we did, Julia Hartley-Brewer is coming next. I'll be back tomorrow at 6.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's always wonderful to have your company. Always also on a Thursday, it's wonderful to have the company of Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. And every single Thursday when you're in, they very helpfully give us a load of defence and security stories to talk about, which is very handy for us.
Well, they know I'm in and they know I know nothing about it, so they just want to try and make me look daft.
That's
which
what it is.
Which is easy.
Which you've totally failed to do over the time you've been doing this show. I think my audience will agree. We will get to defence stories in just a moment, but, of course, coming up in this hour, in exactly an hour's time, we understand Keir Starmer will be making a speech. It's not a reset. Don't use that word. It's not a reset. It's not a relaunch. It is not a relaunch. Please do not use this sort of language. But today he's going to pledge to reset and relaunch his government to meet 6 milestones. Now, these are different from targets. These are now milestones. Can everyone please keep up? I will be testing you later on this. And this is part of his Plan for Change speech. Is everyone keeping up at the back? It's going to include things like raising living standards, cutting NHS waiting lists, building 1.5 million new homes. It'll include an extra 13,000 neighbourhood police. They're not all police, obviously, in England and Wales. One thing it won't include, though, is any pledge on actually tackling mass immigration, even though we know last year, 1 million more people came to live in this country. Do you think that might be why we're having the need for more houses, more pressure on the NHS, wages pushed down? I mean, does anyone think those things might be related? We'll be talking about all of that. I particularly want to hear from you on that, with Keir Starmer pledging to meet 6 milestones by the next election, including the NHS, living standards and the rest, but no pledge on cutting immigration. I want to know simply, what is your reaction to any of those pledges, milestones, targets, whatever you think they are, whatever he's going to call them in his mad, non-human speaking document he's going to release after this? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. And, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about defence security stories, I just mentioned there with Philip. Defence Minister Alistair Cairns has warned that the entire British Army would be wiped out. I mean, every single member of the British Army and the reserves would be wiped out in as little as 6 months if we were drawn into a major conflict. Something to worry about, given that the invasion of Ukraine, we're now into almost the third year, coming up in Feb. Also, the Chief of Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, warned in a speech last night that the world faces a third nuclear age, with China posing a major threat to the West. I mean, it's just non-stop good news today, folks. And also, oh no, there is some good news, I lie, France. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, is facing calls to resign after Michel Barnier, his Prime Minister, was ousted by Parliament, leaving France in a political crisis. A vote of no confidence, of course. What is the French word for schadenfreude? I mean, what is it? There is apparently a word. Apparently there is actually a British word, but it's not used for schadenfreude. Really does work, doesn't it? Anyway, this is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. You're not going to get much common sense, I think, in this speech we're going to hear at 11 o'clock. Philip Ingram, we won't take it live because you know the rules. I like you too much. I wouldn't do that to you. I mean, although I do need the extra nap time. What has he said now? Not a relaunch, not a reset. Philip, everything in the last 5 months has gone absolutely swimmingly. This government is riding high on this wave of euphoria since they've been elected in July. Poll ratings absolutely sky high. They're turning around the economy. The budget has gone down well. I mean, you name it, everything's great, which is, of course, why you don't need a reset. What do you make of these so-called 6 missions? 6, by the way, being better than 5. We had 5 before. Now we've got 6. Now we've got 6. 6 is much better than 5, yes?
Well, not when it comes to missions, because if you've got a mission, you need one mission, and that's it. And all the rest of it, we've got non-pledge milestones, I think, that are coming in. And, of course, Keir Starmer, using his own words, he was elected on a mandate for change. Yeah. He didn't get the memo to say it's change for better, not worse. And
we made a lot of assumptions, didn't we?
We did. And, the thing is, you only get one chance to create a first impression. And if he's having to do a reset or bring out more stuff 5 months into his premiership, he's messed up that first impression.
It really is that simple, isn't it? Again, there were 5 missions before the election, then there were 6 first steps after the election, and now, seriously, I mean, genuinely, if you watch satires, The Thick of It and In the Loop and things like that, and in Esther, you couldn't satirise this stuff. You really couldn't. And the abject inability to speak human as well. Measurable targets, these are, apparently, which the government's going to achieve by spring 2029. There's going to be a 40-page document later, which none of us obviously will read. I'm just going to go through these missions. Milestones. Missions. I can't even remember. 6 milestones. This is what we're going to be able to judge the government by, because there was all this stuff about, highest GDP in the G7. They kind of dropped that casually yesterday, and now it's OECD countries or something, but only because you've got countries like the US whose growth is now taking off. Raising real household disposable income. So that's basically the money in your pocket you've got to spend. People need to be and feel richer. With tax rises at the current time, tax thresholds, I think people are going to be hard-pressed with that. I mean, again, inflation. Inflation will come down, and it will probably stay down unless we get another war or some sort. But fundamentally, a lot of stuff is driven by energy prices. Our energy prices ain't going to go down anytime soon because the mad, insane policies will come to that. And we're never going to have lower prices than we had before a couple of years ago, and wages haven't kept up. So we are going to be feeling poorer, aren't we?
Well, only for a taxpayer. You know, if you're not a taxpayer, then you have more money to put in your pockets, you've got more disposable income. And if you can work that as a percentage of the population, then that's it.
We don't care about those people, or indeed most pensioners who won't have their winter fuel.
And there's no comment on immigration and illegal immigration within that no target. So they will have more disposable income too.
Yeah, exactly. 75% of children ready for reception class at primary school. When they ready, I mean, like not in nappies, able to sit at a chair and take instruction. It was only at 70% before the pandemic. It's now worse with a load of kids sitting at home. Yeah, things that I was talking about in April 2020, because charities and teachers were raising these concerns. But no, you all supported the lockdowns, Labour, so this is on you. This does require some parents to do some, I'm going to go out on a limb here, actual parenting. Why parents don't want to get their kids out of nappies? They cost a bleeding fortune. I do not understand. But parents need to start doing their job. So unless they're actually going to be going into people's homes and forcing parents to do their sodding job, which an awful lot of parents these days don't do, I'm not quite sure that's particularly achievable. And again, how do you measure that? Those two are new. Those two are actually new targets. Again, fairly meaningless. There's no specific... if you raise your real household disposable income by 1 pence, then that technically they've met it. But will you feel any real difference? No. Also, there's a lot they're talking about today, and Yvette Cooper's been out and about. Again, level of incompetence. I watched lots and listened to lots of different broadcasting in the morning to see what everyone else is covering. Yvette Cooper did a number of interviews today, the Home Secretary from Slough. And in every single interview, they had a problem with the link. So she's gone... This is how incompetent their people are. They can't even put her somewhere where she can get a decent link for broadcasting. But anyway, recruiting 13,000 police officers, special constables and PCSOs, and having a named local bobby on the beat. So basically, your local neighbourhood, you have someone you can actually go to, report antisocial behaviour, blah, blah, blah. It's already been pointed out by the Tories that only 3,000 of these are actually new police officers, and new police officers who will be recruited over and above what they'd already said they were going to do. I'm not quite sure what difference it makes if you've got a local police officer to report crime to, if no one ever actually goes and investigates, arrests, and if they did get arrested and charged, the odds of them actually getting a sentence that has actually commensurate with the crime is virtually zero.
They exist already. And they've existed for quite some time. I know my local police officer. I've had to call him in with the team, and there's a team of them with PCSOs as well, and they've come round to my house because
you've called them
because there was an issue that I had to get dealt with, and they were fantastic from a local perspective and kept me up to date with what's going on. So the initiative's already there. So they're announcing something that already exists. Oh, surprise, surprise.
Okay. That's not going down well. Love to hear that about that from you. Also, building 1.5 million new homes. Again, not new. This is also it was in the manifesto. It's the same as the £250,000 a year old Tory target, which by the way they never reached.
Yeah.
And again, 250,000 new homes a year isn't enough when you've got a backlog of people needing new homes, and you've got another 1 million people arriving every year.
Well, and local councils yesterday turned around and said that that's unachievable.
It's going terribly well so far, isn't it, everybody? I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this. Also, treating 92% of NHS patients within 18 weeks of referral. Again, this is old as well. 18. I love this thing, 18 weeks. 4 months. That means you get a referral, urgent cancer referral from your GP, and they'll guarantee that 9 out of 10 of you will be seen within 4 months. You may well be dead within 4 months, or certainly be on to stage 4 and therefore not got a good chance of survival. I'm really not sure that's good enough in a first world country. Also, decarbonising electricity grid by 2030. This is lunatic Ed Miliband stuff. Again, unachievable, unaffordable. And by the way, doing that is going to make everything else impossible, because we're going to absolutely hamstring our economy with that. There's also, just throwing in, there's also 3 foundations. Just to make it a bit more complicated. They are the Economic Border and National Security. I mean, it's all just a load of abject nonsense. No one thinks any of it's going to be achieved. Most of it is either It's either unachievable or such a low standard, it's meaningless. It doesn't include immigration.
Or defence.
Or defence. There's no target of spending that more money on defence. They haven't got the money, but we're going to need to spend the money. I mean, this is Whitehall nonsense, isn't it?
It is. It's what I've said several times beforehand on here is it's politics by soundbite. So it's creating new soundbites.
I wouldn't mind if there was a soundbite.
To make it sound as if they're doing something, they're achieving something, when the reality is if you start to try and analyse the detail, you have to make lots of assumptions because there is no detail in it.
Yep.
When you start to analyse the detail, you realise just it's the foundation of sand it's built on, and the tide's coming in fast.
Yeah, but also, stop telling us what you're going to do. Stop having a review about what you're going to do. Stop having a just do it. Just do it and quietly get on. You've got 4.5 years. And if at the end of 4.5 years we'll go, do you know what? Actually, I do feel better off. And the kids aren't all feral on the street, and I haven't had my phone stolen, and my mum has been able to get her operation in time, and people have been able to, I know people who've been able to move into the housing market. People will know if it's true or not. You don't have to keep telling people just the reality. But I mean, we've been gaslit for years, telling us everything's fine when we know it's not. I'd love to hear from you on this, on any particular target on this side as well, because there's pledged to meet 6 milestones by the next election, including the NHS, living standards, Bobby's on the beat and all that, as we just mentioned. Not a single pledge on immigration, though. Not a single pledge on cutting immigration. I mean, even though Keir Starmer has addressed this issue in a speech recently, what's your reaction to that? Does that tell you that he really doesn't get it? Is any of it achievable unless you actually tackle this underlying massive issue of mass, uncontrolled, legal, not even illegal, legal immigration? I want to hear from you. This is the number to call is 0344 499 1000. You can text 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Don't forget, as I say, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. But I really want to hear your thoughts on this, particularly the lack of immigration being there. Because when you say these are the things that we want to be judged on, these are the things that matter, you're also saying that nothing else doesn't matter, because it's going to be the Prime Minister's priorities. Well, it ain't one of the Prime Minister's priorities. People aren't going to get stuff done, are they? So do let me know. What would you like those missions or milestones or targets or whatever the hell they are, or what they're going to be in a month's time at the next reset or relaunch that isn't a reset or a relaunch? I'd love to hear from you. What should those priorities be? Let's get to some other topics, though. Let's talk about these defence stories, too. Really fascinating. The Armed Forces head, this is Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, warning in a speech last night that China is now a nuclear threat to the West. I mean, anyone with a nuclear weapon is a nuclear threat to the West, I would have thought. But also the Veterans Minister, an actual Defence Minister, this is Alistair Al Carnes, he has warned that the British Army would be basically wiped out in 6 months if we did go to a proper major conflict. You're the military man. What do you make of both of those statements?
Admiral Radakin, Chief of the Defence Staff statements are exactly right. But it's been China's been increasing its nuclear arsenal, has about 500 warheads. It's trying to get up to the same number as the United States, which is about 5,000, of which 1,700 are deployed, and a similar number to...
You need a few, don't they?
You need a few to cut us out. Al Cairns, the Minister for Defence, People and Veterans, well, it is that time of the year. He's talking baubles. Complete baubles, because
you'll let that one through, won't you?
He's been to the Diane Abbott School of Mathematics, because if we look at the current size of the British Army is 72,500, or predicted in 2025.
That's for the full-time people.
That's the full-time people. Another 25,000 part-time people. Full-time people. 1,500 a day dying. He used the Ukraine statistics in his speech. It's more than that a lot of the time, but that's been the average. Defence Intelligence said today the average this year. That means that the British Army will last 48 days. But in reality, the fighting element of the British Army, 1/3 fighting, 2/3 supporting. So those that actually carry the weapons, know how to operate the weapons, will last 16 days. You know how long it takes to train a civilian into a soldier? 13 weeks. It takes another 26 weeks to train them into being a basic infantry soldier.
Let alone a specialist.
Let alone specialist and to be able to command and operate.
We're in quite a lot of trouble. Now, look, realistically, we are an island nation. Realistically, are we going to be invaded by Russia or anyone else anytime soon? Probably, as he pointed out, rather unlikely.
It's not going to happen, and we will only fight as part of a coalition. So our statistics are in there.
But still, we are not a serious fighting force. Well, other countries like Finland, who've just only recently joined the NATO forces, very wisely, and we're actually very lucky to have them because they have something like 250,000 reservists, do they not? A lot of countries have been invaded by Russia, take this stuff a lot more seriously, and Finland knows to their cost. But an awful lot of countries, we think of these very sort of liberal democracies, like of course we couldn't have required military service, but actually an awful lot of countries like Israel, obviously, but many countries in Europe do actually have military conscription for everybody. Okay, you can go and do a civil job alternately, but they feel the need for people to be trained. I mean, in Switzerland, everyone's required to have be trained and have a weapon in their home to protect the country.
And certain European countries have stopped conscription. Germany, but it's now considering bringing it back in again. It's the length of time to train people and get them experience. But it's not just the people, and Al Cairns focused on the people. It's the tanks, the equipment, what they're going to fight with, what they're going to operate. We have currently no tracked self-propelled artillery pieces. It takes even longer to train people in artillery. We're going to have only 148 tanks. The Russians are losing between 10 and 15 tanks a day at the moment on the front line. Ukrainians are losing similar numbers. That means that we are going to last 14 days with our tanks. Now, the British Army is one of the more professional armies as part of NATO, and therefore would be put into the very front of the front line in its fighting. So we'd be fighting as part of a coalition, but we'd be at the tip of the spear because of the professionalism and capability we've got and everything.
But we haven't got many people.
Just where we are. We're not going to last.
Yeah, reality check, everybody. Exactly. But again, defence not a priority for this government. So it's not like the world's getting any more dangerous. So that's fine. And just before we go to break and we get to calls, I just want to talk also about these weight loss drugs. Manjaro is the one which the NHS has been approved to use, and there are millions of people. I think just millions and millions of people who apparently would technically be eligible for this weight loss jab. But severely obese, millions of them are not going to be eligible for it because they basically ruled that although 3.5 million are eligible, they're only going to allow 220,000 patients, fewer than 1 in 10, to be given the drug over the next 3 years. They've been years on waiting lists. They've got BMI, I think it's of 30, and they've got another serious condition, weight related. And there's something typical outcry. We go, it's awful. These things should be available. I mean, these drugs are very expensive. We're going to talk to Carl Hennigan later in the show, and he's spoken to us before, actually. The evidence for these drugs is they don't help everybody lose weight. They help a lot of people lose weight. However, the moment you come off them, guess what happens? Put the weight back on again, unless you change your diet and lifestyle. Well, you could just change your diet and lifestyle and then lose the weight anyway. I mean, if you get that's what everyone else does. And there's obviously this big outcry. The idea that we have any spare money when people are not getting treated for every cancer, to people on waiting lists for heart surgery, that we have any spare money for fat people being given a jab to help them do what they could do for free. I find I'm sorry, but you could be any sodding weight you want. I don't care, but it's not my problem.
I think the problem is not because of the number of fat people that are out there and the effect the drugs has and all the rest of it. It's down to the fact that capacity in the NHS, cost for the NHS, ability to deliver, ability to monitor, because you have to monitor these drugs afterwards through blood tests and all the rest. There's a lot more. It wouldn't have been an issue if the now Secretary of State for Health hadn't turned around and said they will be available for everyone. And they're not. So he's made a pledge, or is it a milestone?
I just don't understand the urge that so many people of the great and the good, they're absolutely obsessed with us not putting, junk food in our mouths. But they seem to be absolutely even more obsessed with giving us drugs to deal with things which are perfectly dealt with completely naturally, which I find absolutely extraordinary. I don't think anyone should be entitled to it. By the way, the amount of food you're not going to eat because you're on this drug, you'll save the money. I think the drugs, I think it's about £200 or £300 a month. So, you're probably going to be eating fewer takeaways, which is presumably why you're that fat anyway, which you're entitled to be. I'm not judging. I don't care what you weigh. So you're free to eat yourself to oblivion if you want. I don't care. But don't expect me to pay for the context. If you're eating fewer takeaways, my guess is you could probably afford the jab yourself. Maybe get your family to chip in. I'm sorry. Put the chips down and get your family to chip in. 10:22 is the time. Up next, we're going to get to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Feel free to call in about that, about defence and all the other happy stories of the day. But in particular on this big new, not a reset, not a relaunch speech from Keir Starmer, where we've got now 6 milestones that he's going to be judged on at the next election. I tell you what, though, I've got a funny feeling we get to decide what we judge you on, Keir. Anyway, this is Talk, the home of common sense.
In my mind why I made the move, but partly it was Donald Trump's success, because in a way he's shown what the Conservative Party could have been.
Yes.
You know, he's built this very successful Republican Party that appeals to working class blue collar Americans who want immigration under control, who are unhappy about what their kids are being taught in schools.
To have enough money to have a decent standard of living.
Yeah, and what the Tories did after the Brexit vote is they could have controlled immigration, they could have kept taxes down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning once again. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Welcome back to the show. Philip Ingram's still with me as well. And let's get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say on anything we're talking about today, obviously. But in particular, in about half an hour's time, Keir Starmer is going to be making a big reset, relaunch, not a relaunch speech to meet 6 new milestones by the next election. This is what he wants us to judge him on. I've gone through them in great detail already, more detail than probably is going to be in his speech, so you know what we're talking about. But crucially, what's not in there is anything about immigration, even though it's top 3 issue for pretty much every voter in the country. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Roger has called that number. He's in Basingstoke. Good morning to you, Roger.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Roger.
What do you make of these milestones, then?
Well, I've got a couple of ones for you. How about net zero illegal migrants from tomorrow?
Now that's a net zero I could get behind.
Yes, I'm fed up. Well, I don't pay for all of it, obviously, but the current cost of these migrants is something in the region of $5 billion a year.
Yep.
And next year, it'll be something like 7 or something like that.
Yep.
So the next milestone would be 100% repatriation of all the illegals who've broken into the country.
But for me also, the people who have overstayed their visa, there's something like, they think, roughly in the region of 1.5 million people in this country who've got no right to be living here, working here. They're here illegally. If I were in another country, apparently this is cruel and awful, and people say when Donald Trump says he's going to do it and may well do it in America, that this is somehow inhuman. No, I don't have a right to go and live anywhere I want to go and live. I had a 6-month visa to work in America when I was about 21. And the day before that visa expired, I left the country because I was no longer legally allowed to work there. It didn't seem to me to be unreasonable.
Of course. And, of course, they say that these illegals, many of them are doctors. They're the sort of doctor who would take your kidneys out in the street when you want.
Exactly. I mean, it is an absolute joke, isn't it? But what about, the legal immigration issue? We talked about that at the end of last week. I mean, the numbers were off the scale. And, by the way, they didn't even realise, they'd miscounted the Office for National Statistics, 300,000. By 300,000, they literally lost 300,000 people actually here legally who had visas, who checked in electronically with their passports when they arrived in the country.
And, of course, they're going to bring in every sort of third cousin or whatever belonging to them. And the other thing you mentioned earlier about these millions of homes we've got to build, I don't think any of them should go to illegals.
Well, they don't. Well, technically they wouldn't, but although there is the issue, of course, this government wants, the Home Office, they want to fast-track and basically get through all the backlog of asylum applications. And we know how they're going to do it. They've made it really clear. They're going to basically give people leave to stay. They're no longer going to be housed in hotels, but, of course, they then go on the housing list, the local housing list, don't they? That's the trouble.
And then, of course, my last milestone is we've got to sort of build up the armed forces.
Yep.
Because I have to disagree with Phil. I think our army couldn't last a couple of weeks.
I love that he's already said he thought the armed forces minister was wrong in saying we could last 6 months.
16 days.
I mean, OK, I'm going to go for 2 days. I'm going to beat you all. Roger, thank you very much for your call. Really appreciate that. Let's go to Daniel. He's in Epsom. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Julia. Hello, Philip. How are you?
Hello. All better for speaking to you. What do you want to say?
Well, I just think it's bizarre that he's having a reset or a recalculation. What he means by that is the first 5 or 6 months have been absolutely disastrous.
Yep.
I've never known a more unpopular government or a more unpopular Prime Minister. I mean, he's absolutely loathed by the public. And the fact that he can do this without even mentioning immigration at all, I think is absolutely astounding. If you're on the ground out there, one of the British people, that's all we talk about. Every time I used to live in Croydon, and every time I see people that still live there, they say to me, "I can't believe it. The town's ruined." We can all see that immigration is destroying the fabric of Britain. You know, the towns and cities that we grew up in are toilets. No one wants to live there anymore. If you're still stuck there, it's just. So for him to basically completely ignore a major issue that the majority of British people don't want, I just think it's insane. I just think he
But it's just so out of touch, isn't it? But this is what they say they want to be judged on.
Yeah, but they almost. I always think there's a disconnect between the government, successive governments. Yeah. This is why Reform are going to do so well moving forward. Because
Nigel Farage was telling a bunch of Tories and Labour people on Tuesday night that was the case.
Yeah, well, it is the case because they seem him and his party seem to be the only people that talk like your average man in the street talks, thinks like your average man in the street thinks. Yeah. And we've been screaming for 20, 30 years, bring legal migration down to extremely low numbers, stop illegal immigration. And all they've done in 30-odd years is just ignore the wishes of the majority of British people.
And shouted bigot at them. I mean, that's the added insult. Daniel, I think you make a very, very good point. Daniel Epsom, thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, it's coming up to 10:33. In just a few moments, we'll hear actually from a former Labour Party official about why immigration isn't in there, given it's such a big concern for so many British people. We'll talk to Richard Power-Said. We're also going to be talking about what on earth is going on in France with their government in turmoil. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm joined by Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. I'm also now delighted to say I'm joined by Richard Power-Said. He's a former Labour Party official and the author of the book 1997, The Future That Never Happened, A History of New Labour. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much. I note a tone of weariness in your voice there, Richard. Interesting that your book was about, New Labour in 1997, and Tony Blair came in on a whirlwind of support, sky-high poll ratings, went on to win 2 general elections. Yeah, his support went down for each election, but he was still a Prime Minister with a massive majority all 3 terms. I don't think there's anyone right now, other than maybe Keir Starmer and I don't know, maybe his wife, maybe Lord Ali, his biggest fan and donor, who thinks he's going to make it to the next term. But he's absolutely convinced that what he wants to be judged by in 2029, if he lasts that long, is on his 6 milestones, not the 5 missions before the election, not the 6 first steps after the election, but now it's the 6 milestones. We've been going through them with our audience about the NHS, eco targets, schools, homes, bobbies on the beat, etc., etc. The one thing that's missing, which is a glaring omission, given that these are supposed to be his priorities and we should judge him on them, is anything about either illegal or mass legal immigration. Why is that not there?
Well, let's start with the irregular immigration question.
Illegal immigration.
You've had...
it's illegal immigration, not irregular, it's illegal immigration. If you come to this country illegally, it's against the law.
There's an interesting legal question there, which I think is incredibly boring to talk about, but I disagree with you, and we'll probably leave it.
You get on a boat without documentation in France and you arrive in our country, you're an illegal immigrant.
You've had almost 10,000 people deported since Keir Starmer took over. Number of deported foreign criminals up 14% since last year. You've had this guy, the Engine King, arrested. He's the guy who's suspected of being behind supplying small boats equipment to people smugglers. You've got the NCA leading about 70 investigations into people smuggling right now. You've had this border security boost. Funding for the Border Security Command is going to double to 150 million. You've got this new intelligence unit that's been...
It's all going brilliantly.
To use counter-terrorism techniques to crack down on the criminal gangs. This is how you do it.
OK, great. And so hey, if he's so confident, you'd think he'd mention it. Wouldn't that be a good way of people judging him? You've actually smashed the gangs.
So I think the short answer to that is I don't see why every single different policy area should be in every
Even though it's a major issue, and one of the major issues on which Tories lost the last election. And as you know, looking at the actual figures for the last election, this was very much a Tory defeat rather than a Labour victory. Let's talk about legal migration. People given visas by the government to come and live and work in this country. We know that in the last few years, basically, it's pretty much, in terms of the actual numbers of people arriving, it's over 1 million most years now. There's nothing in them. This is a major issue. This has massive impact on pretty much every one of the other milestones that are mentioned, does it not? If you need more homes, well, one of the reasons you need new homes because we've added millions more people to the country. One of the reasons why people wait on the NHS is because we've added so many people on those NHS waiting lists. Why is that not mentioned?
I think you've kind of just answered your own question, actually, there, Julia. The reason that it's really stupid to have a target, like a numerical target for migration, like the Tories tried and failed to do during 14 years of Tory failure, is that it's so intimately related with everything else, right? You know, how many new people do you have coming into the labour market because of birth rates? How much economic growth do you need through those new workers? All these kinds of things are intimately related. And the idea that you would set a target now for what's going to be necessary in 5 years is absolute nonsense. Also, you're talking about kind of things like the NHS. The whole point is that most of our new NHS workers, maybe not most, an incredibly high proportion of new NHS workers are coming from new migrants to this country.
Yeah, and why do we do that? And why is that necessary?
Suddenly start comparing like, oh, we want NHS capacity, oh, but we want less migration. It doesn't work that way.
Well, it does that way. If you train up... Look, right now, there are loads of young people who are putting their UCAS forms in and waiting for interviews and offers from universities, OK? And there are loads and loads of really great students who've got straight A's in their science and their maths subjects who are going to be rejected for places at medical school at universities in Britain because we have a cap on the number of people...
There are not loads of people with straight A's who are going to be rejected.
There are thousands nonsense. Every year. There are. I looked this up. There are.
And meanwhile,
we don't have enough places.
Getting on with the job. We're going to have 92%
so we're going to import people
routine
from
operations and appointments done within 18 weeks by the next election. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic. Sorry, you think it's fantastic that someone could be referred by their GP for operation, for treatment for their cancer, for instance, but they'll get seen, 9 out of 10 of them, not all of them, within 4 months. I mean, oh, well done. We're such a proud, functioning first world country. It's a failure on the Tories in 14 years, but if that is the limit of the Labour ambition, we are damned.
If after 14 years you're asking Keir Starmer to magically change everything that the Tories have done over 14 years of Tory failure, then you're asking for something that obviously is impossible.
I don't think they're going to turn it around in a few months.
Bad journalism.
I don't think they're going to turn it around in a few months. No one expects that. But if they've not even got reasonable targets... I mean, why do we think only 75% of kids should be ready for school at the age of 4 or 5? Surely 100% would be the target. I don't understand why
you're asking for targets.
So
we're asking for targets that are reasonable but ambitious, right? And most people have actually been complaining about these targets, saying that they're not going to be achieved, right? I would say that they are exactly in that sweet spot between quite difficult to achieve. So you're pushing Whitehall to deliver 1.5 million new homes by the end of this Parliament.
That's the same as the Tory target for the last 5 years.
For every single neighbourhood. That's really great stuff, but it's difficult to do.
You're talking about this stuff as if it's sort of getting a man on the moon. This is basic stuff that most other countries manage to do with their eyes shut.
No,
yes,
they don't.
do.
There
isn't a housing crisis across most of Europe. There isn't a housing crisis in America.
Let's talk about the economics target, for instance, saying that real household disposable income is going to be up.
We're going to be richer.
You might say that doesn't sound ambitious. Let's break it down. Let's think about what that is. Household income, we all know what that is. Real means it's been adjusted for inflation. Disposable means it's not the basic stuff in life that you need to live on. It's the not even little luxuries. It's like, can you replace your kitchen gadget when it gets broken? After 14 years of stagnation for that measure of living standards under the Tories, longer than we've ever had since the Second World War, far longer, Keir Starmer's saying he's going to totally turn that around so that it's improved by the end of this Parliament.
If every family in this country is 1 pence better off, he can technically, in real terms, he can say, well, I've raised them. Raised by how much? How much better off?
Well, the point is that it's stagnated over 14 years.
Is there anything that happened before?
Turning that around would be an astonishing thing to achieve. And if you're giving your viewers the impression that wouldn't be a huge turnaround for the economy, something that lots of economists think literally is impossible, then I would suggest that you're giving them a misapprehension.
Okay, I'm being a bad journalist. I mean, look, Richard, you know me, I'm the biggest critic of the last Tory government in terms of their failures. So this is no way defending their record. But did anything happen before 2010 when Tories got in that might have caused some of the stagnation? Did anything happen in 2020, which your lot supported with bells on in terms of lockdowns? Did anything happen in 2022 that affected energy prices? I mean, come on, things have been bad. Tories messed a lot of stuff up, but an awful lot of it was down to stuff that was outside of their control or stuff that you supported as well in your party.
I'll tell you what I think is ultimately the problem. And there are some people in the Labour Party who are responsible for this as well, but I think it's fundamentally a Conservative responsibility. And that's a lack of investment, yeah?
True.
That's the lack of investment in the UK economy is the fundamental problem. It's why productivity growth is low. It's why growth as a whole is low. And look at what's happened this summer. The government secured 63 billion quid in commitments from international investors during the investment
They didn't
summit.
do that. People were going to do that
major
anyway.
Projects in clean energy, major projects in AI. You've got this Spanish energy company, Iberdrola. They're going to double their investment to 24 billion
out
in the
of
UK.
charity. No, they're going to come and make money out of us. That's what they're going to do.
Exactly. They're going to come bring their cash.
You think they weren't going to anyway? They weren't going to do it if Labour weren't in power and there hadn't been that investment summit. By the way, the most innovative, richest man in the world, Elon Musk wasn't invited because he'd written a hurty tweet about the Prime Minister a few weeks earlier. Here's the thing. One of these 6 milestones, not targets, not pledges, milestones, very, very different apparently, is decarbonising electricity grid by 2030. Not only is this unachievable, it won't happen. I'm telling you right now, it won't happen. It's also unaffordable. And to do that, if we were able to do it, we are looking at massively increasing our energy costs. We've already got some of the highest energy costs in the Western world, in fact, in the world at all. You ain't going to power up economy. You ain't going to make people richer. You ain't going to be able to afford to put more bobbies on the beat and treat more NHS patients and any of that. You're not going to be able to do any of that if people can't afford to go about life. You can't have jobs because people can't afford to run factories and shops and keep them open because energy prices are so high. You need to ditch that milestone before you can achieve any of the others. What do you say to that?
Anybody who looks at geopolitics right now and thinks that fossil fuels are going to be cheap in 5 years is an utter idiot. I'm just, no.
Anyone who thinks the wind is going to blow every day and the sun's going to shine every day is an even bigger idiot.
And that's exactly why that's not what the plan is based on. The plan is based on ensuring that the grid can cope with the sun shining up in the north, but you can still turn your kettle on in the south, or the wind blowing in the south, and you can still use it to turn your lights on in the north. That's what you do if you integrate the grid, which is what other countries have done.
Oh, I mean, I love your faith in this, but this is Alice in Wonderland lunatic stuff. This is completely and utterly, utterly mad stuff. But look, what can we say? Richard, I always so appreciate you coming on. We've got that speech coming up very soon. I know Angela Rayner is going to be introducing Keir Starmer, so I'm sure we'll find out a lot more detail. But Richard Powside, thank you so much for joining us on that. Quick word from Philip Ingram.
Soundbite baubles.
I'm so glad he keeps saying baubles, because he's been threatening other words the whole way through. Thank you very much indeed for that. Coming up, we're going to talk about, you think things are bad here, folks? We've actually got a government that's got a majority and will last. I mean, really may not be the Prime Minister, but a government can last for another 4.5 years. Not so in France. What is going on? We'll talk to James Bull from the New European in just a few moments. This is Talk.
You're now turning into Keir Starmer. Look at the statistics. Well, walk down the street in London and you'll see what's going on. You will know that there is much more crime and people fearful of being assaulted than they've ever been in my lifetime.
No, you have to stick to facts, Mike.
Yes, I do stick to facts, but statistics aren't facts. And I know
people are afraid of crime. And
statistics are not facts, John.
But yes, they are facts. Crime is the lowest it's been.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. It's 10:52. Let's talk about what is going on in France. And the main thing I've been worrying about for the last, 12 hours or so is what is the French word for schadenfreude? Because watching the man who was, of course, the EU's chief negotiator over the Brexit talks, Michel Barnier, being ousted as a French Prime Minister after just 3 months, after forcing through a new budget on social security, despite the majority in Parliament, both on the left and the right, voting against it, has led to a no-confidence vote against him last night. Emmanuel Macron returned from a foreign visit. He's making a big speech to the French people at 7 o'clock tonight, but is denying that he is willing to resign and go to a presidential election. Let's talk about all this with James Ball. He's political editor of the New European. Good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
These are absolutely extraordinary scenes in France. Does everything still just go back to, I suppose, the European elections back earlier this year, which saw Emmanuel Macron's party utterly trounced, and then that calling of that snap election that has got him into this mess?
I think it's a more specific French mess than that. I mean, they've essentially... They've got a horrible budget deficit. Their finances are in a really parlous state, and if they don't do something, they're heading for absolute emergency. But their voters absolutely do not want to do anything about it. And so they've returned a sort of parliament in 3 blocks. You've sort of got a hard right bloc that's Le Pen's party. You've got a left coalition, which is at the moment led by a guy called Mélenchon. And then Emmanuel Macron's centrists, who only have about 1/3 of the seats and have been trying to govern on their own. And that's sort of the problem. Macron hasn't been trying to make any concessions to either of the blocs. He could probably pick off some of the centre-left lot and hasn't really tried.
Well, there was an attempt early on, wasn't there? But the left and the left grouping has basically said, they made their demands are sort of impossible to meet. I mean, the problem you've got with both the left and the right in French politics is, I would say hopeless centrists as well, if you're going to call Macron a centrist, is that their demands are utterly unreasonable. They want loads more money for everybody, everyone retiring very young, and no new taxes. Our finances here are terrible. The French public finances are in a parlous state.
There is an element of that. It has to be said. France is still trying to reverse raising the retirement age from 62.
Yeah.
This is quite young for a country with life expectancy slightly better than ours.
I know. I mean, again, they're not even working till 60. They're at lunch half the day, so I don't know why they feel the need to retire so early. But this is the thing.
But Macron could have done something here. The left proposed a quite reasonable civil servant who Macron could have lived with, and he could have peeled off about half of that coalition with that and probably had enough to get something done and last a little longer than this. As it is, the government's collapsed, but France's constitution doesn't allow an election until at least July.
Yeah.
So they can't change the composition of the parliament. They can't change... Le Pen wants to bring Macron down. If she does it now, she can stand for president. If she waits, she's likely to be disqualified from politics for 5 years because of a criminal conviction.
Yeah, and there's a hearing earlier next year about this, and it looks like Macron wants to certainly wait until later. The thing is, the whole thing was he's there was a big support for Macron for Le Pen's National Rally Party in the European elections. We saw this back with UKIP and the Brexit Party, didn't we? Back ahead of 2 general elections in our country as well. And basically he tried to sort of call the bluff of the French people and say, you don't really want these people in Parliament. Oops, it turns out they did. But this is the thing. Macron is now effectively a lame duck president, is he not? I mean, the French people have said, we don't really want you. He never really had that much support, even though he's been elected on a landslide both times around. It's because he's been up against Le Pen in the final round of 2 each time. And many people are predicting that if she can stand, Marine Le Pen would win in a couple of years' time if she was able to stand again. But how does France continue to sort of carry on when no government can pass any measures?
I mean, Macron is very good at campaigning and very good at sort of winning elections and very bad at everything that comes in between. It's as if he seems to think seeing off the far right with a sort of thumping majority gives him that kind of mandate from the people that he doesn't have. And that arrogance has just led him to mismanage Parliament time and again. But there does seem to be, the problem in France is they do need to sort their finances, or they are going to collapse, possibly the whole Eurozone. And they have so many politicians willing to tell them that they can keep spending and keep ignoring it, that it's impossible to do. Yeah. I mean, the issue is France is on its fifth republic. It's changed its constitution 5 times to try and make the republic work, and it is now looking like the Fifth Republic might not manage either.
Not working out again. Of course, France.
It's hard to see how to get out of this.
Yeah, France is too big to fail, but Germany hasn't got the finances to help bail out. It was France and Germany, their banks, that bailed out Greece. France's economy is way bigger than Greece's, and I mean, this is the thing: they can't be allowed to fail, and yet interest rates going up on their government debt. The situation is getting worse, not better. It is a bizarre situation. Can I just ask you this before I let you go, James? About the newspaper you work for, because I understand, I think it was a week or two ago, the New European issued a list of people, their top 100 people. I think it's people to hate. It's called the, I'll have to paraphrase, the hit list, except there's an S before the hit. I'm not allowed to say that word in it. The hit list. My lovely colleague Mike Graham was on it. I was on it. Various people who appear regularly on this station were on it. Is that really how we do politics now? Because your side of the debate, the Remainer, Europe-obsessed, left side of the debate, is obsessed with everyone has to be kind, everyone has to be nice, and isn't these nasty, horrible, people on the right who are making, this public discourse so horrible. And then on your front page, you have a word beginning with S, rhyming with list. You have the hit list, and calling people who are politicians and public speakers a bad word. What do you make of that? Are you proud of that?
I mean, Julia, I would take it as a compliment if I were you.
I just don't care.
We've constantly been told we don't have a sense of humour, or that we try and be too high-minded and too fuddy-duddy.
But if people on the right did that, if Brexiteers did that, we would be told off.
Oh, I've had all sorts of these myself. You know that we get enough of this. We're trying to live in the real world. People want a bit of a list of who
by calling people who you don't agree with SHITs.
I've been called much worse. It's a list.
That makes it okay.
Not it is one, but it's a list of people our readers don't particularly like.
Yeah, but there's lots of people I don't like, but I don't have to insult. But anyway, look, I just wanted to tack you on that way. I mean, you can call me what you want. I just think it's a bit embarrassing. But there we go. James Paul, loved to talk to you. Anyway, this is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
UK on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Welcome back to the show. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connection device, great to have your company. Also, great to have the company of Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Thank you, as always, for joining us. And again, on a day when there's lots of defence stories in the news. But, of course, the big story today is the relaunch that's not a relaunch, the reset that's not a reset, and the targets that aren't targets. Is everyone keeping up at the back? Keir Starmer, in the next, I think it's 11:15 he's now speaking, is going to be announcing his we had 5 missions, then we had 6 first steps. We've now got 6 milestones that are going to be announced. There's also 3 foundations, just to get even more confused. These are measurable targets. These are the things that he thinks he can achieve, and he wants to be judged by the electorate on by the end of spring 2029, when he has to call the next general election, assuming he is still PM at that time. I think there's a lot of ifs going there. But I'm asking you about this because include things like building 1.5 million new homes. Well, you already had that one. Decarbonising the energy system. Well, that was already there. By the way, those things are probably mutually incompatible. But also raising living standards, cutting NHS waiting lists and things like that. Doesn't include anything about immigration, even though it's a top 3 issue for pretty much every voter in the country, unless they go to Islington dinner parties. So I want to talk about that, and would love to get your thoughts on that as well. I'm also going to talk about defence issues, because Defence Minister Alistair Khan has warned that the entire British Army would be wiped out in as little as 6 months if we were drawn into a major conflict. That's including all the reservists as well. Given that Ukraine has been fighting for 2 3/4 years against Russia, maybe we should actually be thinking about these things more longer term. Plus, new analysis has found that police forces are allowing staff to investigate child abuse and sex offences to work from home. Because what could possibly go wrong if they're working from home? Also, just some new stats that have just come in. There's been a whole tranche of government statistics that have just come out, NHS and other things as well. But according to government estimates today, the prison population in England and Wales is projected to rise from its current number of around 95,000 to 100,000. Within 5 years. So we don't have that many prison places, and we're unlikely to have those built in time or on budget beforehand. So good luck with that, everybody, with your Bobby on the beat, getting him or her to turn up to investigate your crimes. Anyway, I do want to hear from you in particular about these 6 milestones. Tell me, what is the difference between a milestone, a mission, a target? I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Is this what you're going to be judging the Prime Minister on, or frankly, do you get to decide what you judge the sodding government on? I think we like to decide ourselves, don't we, as voters? Making pledges on the NHS, which we kind of already knew about, living standards is a new one, all these other things, but not making a single mention of immigration at any point, and one of his 6 key milestones he wants to be judged on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1. Standard network rate. Message. Philip, you've used a wonderfully not rude word to talk about this earlier. 6 first steps, 5 missions now 5 months in, 6 milestones. I love the eye roll.
I'm a military planner, and whenever I hear someone say 6 missions, I start to shake, because there should only ever be 1 mission.
Which is?
Which is the overall objective you're trying to achieve, and then it's got a unifying purpose which tells everyone why you're trying to achieve it. So if your milestones or your objectives...
But you have to have specific things, because just saying, we're going to make life better for everyone in Britain, well, that would be nice. What sort of things we'd then say? So you're going to have to give
that's when you break it. That's when you break it down, and this is where you're seeing random language thrown around because they want to put a different word in for the sound bites to make it sound as if it's different. They're actually getting the understanding of what these are wrong, and if you're getting the basic understanding of how to plan things wrong, you're not going to get your plans right. You have to understand how to put things together, and it's quite clear the government and those that are advising the government don't know how to do that.
Well, listen, we're told there are all these very, very so clever people around the Prime Minister. We were told Sue Gray was going to be absolutely brilliant in making a plan for government. Well, how did that work out? It turns out it was just a plan to sort of basically annoy pretty much everybody else. If they were so good at this stuff, you wouldn't need to have what is, whether they say it or not, a relaunch and a reset after 5 months with a massive big election mandate as they've got in terms of the number of MPs, if perhaps not the number of votes they've got. But they'd say this plan for change. And you pointed out earlier that people might have voted for the plan for change.
Yes, but the plan that they voted for was for something that should be getting better, but clearly Keir Starmer didn't get the memo.
And
he's changing
direction?
for the worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, look, you've just tuned in. I know you're very excited about this. Angela Rayner, by the way, is now introducing the Prime Minister to this event in Buckinghamshire. When the Prime Minister gets up to speak, because I like you too much, I will not be taking this speech live. There's always people in this office go, we should take the speech live. Seriously, I mean, why don't you just tell people to switch off the radio and go and watch a nice little bit of paint dry on the wall? I mean, he's a terrible. I'm sorry, the man can't make switching on the Christmas tree lights exciting. He can't make this 5, 4, 3. Yeah, you see, if you counted 1 to 6 instead of down from 5 to 0, it would have worked better. Anyway, his measurable targets to be achieved by spring 2029 and for us to judge him on are as follows. Pay attention at the back, everybody. Raising real household disposable income. So it's not about GDP in comparisons with the G7. They're dropping all that because America's going to do so much better than us. We're going to look really bad. But, I mean, you raise it by a penny. Well done. I mean, but that's not going to make us feel any richer. 75% of children ready for school, primary school, at the age of 4 or 5. I mean, why not 100%? I mean, and also what you do, you're going into every single home. You're literally going into people's homes and saying, hey, your child needs a bedtime. You need to be reading books to your kid and giving them some broccoli and getting them out of nappies because they're sodding 4.5 years old. Do your job as a parent. That's not going to happen. They're going to fudge that one. Recruiting 13,000 more police officers. Now, it's police officers, special constables and PCSOs, the plastic bombies. Basically, only 3,000 new police that they weren't already going to recruit across an entire country. I mean, you're not going to be seeing this Bobby on the beat. There's talk about this named local police officer who's responsible for your neighbourhood that you can email, that you can call. I mean, look, he's putting his head in his hands. The reality is, I mean, you were saying earlier, actually, that is the case. They already exist in a lot of areas. Yeah. I mean, if I see a police officer in my local area, it's very unlikely.
Well, you don't see them, you have to call them, you know where they are, but there are names, and on the local police website, they're there with their pictures. But
the question is, if someone's not working 3, 6, 5 days, they're out on holiday, they go on breaks, they sleep. They don't maybe work, a 7-day week, wouldn't expect that. So you couldn't do that anyway. I mean, it doesn't, But again, there's no point in having loads more police if no one ever gets investigated. Lots of people report crimes to the police, but then they say there's no evidence. Well, there's no evidence because they don't go collect the evidence. And if they do collect the evidence, they lose. I'm sorry, that's been my experience. And then they don't bother pressing charges. They don't send it to CPS, and then the CPS doesn't press charges. And even if they do, go to court, get a slap on the wrist. Now you're just going to get a community sentence, we learned this week, and then you're not going to go to prison. So you're back on the streets able to commit crime. I do not understand why there is even any point in having these police officers.
There's one thing that's missing from all these milestones, and that's how. For example, if you want to get kids out of nappies, make sure that they're ready for nappies in school. You ban disposable nappies because
no more banning.
No, but think of all the mothers then who are having to use terry nappies and put them through the.
Can I just say, on behalf of mothers, sod off. No, thank you.
But then you'd very quickly get your kid out of nappies.
But don't penalise the mums who need to have a nappy for their kid. I mean, dads. I know dads do it too.
My mum got me out of nappies very quickly indeed because she had to use them.
I know. Honestly, things that have improved women's lives. People go, the Equality Act, this and that. No, it was the pill, washing machine, supermarkets and disposable nappies. That's it. That's what changed women's lives. The next one is building 1.5 million new homes. That's 250,000 new homes a year. More people than that come to live in this country every year. And even, except that, people don't come desperate on their own. A lot of them bring their whole families. But we haven't even got enough homes for people who are already here. If you're importing 1 million new people every year, that doesn't touch the side of it. It's the same as the Tory target. I'm sorry, they're not going to do it either. Also, treating 92% of NHS patients within 18 weeks of them being referred by their GP. 18 weeks is 4 months. Treating not even all NHS patients within 4 months, even for serious things. An urgent referral can still mean a 4-month wait. for many cancer patients. I'm sorry. I've got my Eastern European cleaner. When she had a cancer referral, she went back to Romania. She was treated within 2 weeks. Operation, everything done. I'm sorry. This is an embarrassment in a first world country. But also the final one, decarbonise the electricity grid by 2030. This is Ed Miliband's mad lunacy, unachievable, unaffordable, and will keep us in poverty.
See, where I am from the NHS, an urgent cancer referral, because I went through it, was 3 weeks. What was the key word? They're being the word urgent. Urgent, and actually I was seen within 10 days for my first scans, and then that picked up stuff. Another 10 days for the next treatment. Another 10 days.
10 days is still pretty hard
for referral for surgery, and another 10 days I was in surgery. So there's a postcode lottery when it comes to the things across the NHS, and this is where there's all these sound bites that are coming out. There's no how in them, and it's the how that's the important bit. That's what we want to know.
Absolutely. Well, the key thing not in there is immigration. Yeah. Nothing on illegal immigrants. There's no the smashing the gangs, stopping the boats and all that stuff. There's nothing about legal migration. Even though Keir Starmer talked about, uncontrolled mass migration, he actually touched on it, even though, of course, secretly he and his acolytes all absolutely believe in open borders. I know they do. They've made it really clear before. It's a top 3 issue for most voters in this country, including Labour voters, who are massively affected by this issue. And again, this is not anti the immigrants themselves. Welcome, work hard, that's fine. It's whether or not it's a benefit to this country in terms of cutting wages, competing for public services, housing, public transport places, etc., etc. And this is the key issue. And my question to everyone today is, with Keir Starmer making all these pledges to meet 6 milestones, but not a single pledge on cutting migration, if you're saying these are my priorities, judge me on this, and you don't even mention immigration in this, does that tell you this isn't a priority? And can you really deal with any of these issues if you don't tackle that fundamental issue, which is having a massive impact on us economically, individually, culturally, and every other way? So give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text 87222, get in touch with us at Talk TV, and I'd love to get your calls on air very soon. I mean, Philip, leaving out immigration just says they're just totally out of touch.
Well, I think it's probably an admission that he can't do anything about it. And therefore, all the plans. Whenever Richard Parsaid was talking about it, he mentioned one of the successes as dealing with one of the kingpins who supplies the rubber boats in Europe. That was nothing to do with the government. It was nothing to do with the British involvement. It was, I think, the German police managed to arrest him. But Keir Starmer has said this is evidence of me smashing the gangs. No, sorry. This was stuff that has been going on for months and months and months, if not years beforehand, and it's nothing to do with him.
Exactly.
He doesn't know how to deal with it.
Let's also talk about defence issues, because you're an expert on this field. So 2 big stories. One is the Defence Minister's accounts warning that the entire British Army would be wiped out in as little as 6 months if we were drawn into a major conflict, bearing in mind where we are with Ukraine, almost 3 years, in February, fighting that conflict. The Chief of Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, warning in a speech last night that the world faces a third nuclear age with China's nuclear threat to the West. What do you make of both those stories?
Well, Chief of Defence Staff is completely right. China's been building up its nuclear weapons, had about 500. It's trying to get up to US numbers, which is about 5,000, same as the Russian 5,000, of which 1,700 are deployed. They're on a plan to modernise their military and have been for quite a number of years now. And we're beginning to realise that as a threat when we see their expansionism that they're carrying out in South China Seas, but the way they're influencing into Africa and into South America as well. The numbers game, it's the Diane Abbott School of Mathematics, or Christmas baubles when it comes to that, because you add together our regular army and our immediate reserve forces that are out there, it's just under 100,000. Take the number that Al Cairns himself had talked about, the loss of 1,500 a day. That is 67 days. But actually, if you break that down to the fighting force of the army, 67 days to get rid of everyone.
Including reservists.
Including reservists. Take that down to just the fighting element, that's 22 days.
Because lots of people involved in the logistics and other things.
Yeah, logistics and all the support and everything else. Well, they're all trained soldiers, but...
I'm feeling a little bit scared at this point.
We should be. It takes 91 days to train a civilian to be a trained soldier. It takes 26 weeks, which is 182 days, to take a trained soldier and train them as a proper infantry soldier to fight.
And yet we still won't find out until next year when Labour are going to commit to this 2.5% of the GDP being spent on defence. We were far too late on that. The Tories were late on that. They hadn't achieved that either. But, I mean, it seems to me that doesn't touch the sides of what our needs are. Should we be looking at conscription in this country?
I don't think we should be looking at conscription.
Or
but,
at least, but some sort of military service.
We should be.
Many other European countries do it already or are doing it.
We should be planning for it. So it doesn't mean that we need to bring conscription in, but we should be planning for it. But Al Cairns turned around and said mass isn't necessarily the answer, but the reality is mass is, and you also need the equipment, because the equipment's going to last even shorter period of time with what's changing in the battlefield. So we are in dire straits.
We really are.
We're not going to fight alone. But Al Cairns knew that, so his calculations are based on us not fighting alone. It's a lot worse than he brought out. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it really is. And again, by the way, sometimes we do fight alone. Falklands. It's not that. It's in my lifetime.
Yeah. But that's not the high intensity.
That's not the high intensity. But we were fighting alone. Yeah, but there's a lot of people who pointed out we probably aren't in a position to defend the Falklands if there was an invasion now.
We could do now. Yeah,
just about.
More than just about. No,
okay.
We've got much greater capability.
Well, I mean, actually, it won't be an issue because obviously Keir Starmer will give it away if anyone asks nicely.
Well, exactly.
Keir Starmer is now speaking, but again, remember, I like you more than the BBC and Sky and all that lot like their audience, because I'm not playing it to you live. That's how much I like you, because I would like you to stay awake. Do not operate heavy machinery or drive a motor vehicle when listening to a Keir Starmer speech. There should be warnings. You get warnings. You get, you take like an antihistamine that says, "Do not operate heavy machinery." They should have that underneath his speeches.
Do we do a countdown for the warning?
Don't listen. 5, 4, 3. No, we're doing it too fast. It was much slower than that for the Christmas lights. Genuinely, I'd play that every single day till the Christmas. The Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, was among a cast of millions at Pinewood Studios. This is where the speech is, introducing the Prime Minister and saying that clearing up the mess we inherited feels like a job for a superhero. I mean, superhero. Well, again, if it's a job for a superhero, he ain't. Can I get into one man who definitely thinks he is, though? Just quickly, because I want to get to a break, because we've got lots of calls coming in on this. France. We didn't get a chance to get your thoughts on where we are with France, having spoken to James Ball. Macron doing a big set-piece speech. He loves his... I mean, God, he loves his pompous speeches, doesn't he? This is a man... The Metropolitan elite in the rest of Europe are convinced this man is incredibly popular in France because he wins these landslides. No, given a choice between Marine Le Pen for many years and him, he was a landslide. When it's first choice, of all the candidates standing, he's never garnered more than, I think, 22% of the vote. He's not a popular figure. He's largely derided now by the left and the right. He played a little political game calling this snap parliamentary election in July. It's gone horribly, tragically wrong. Michel Barnier, his nominee for Prime Minister, he's lasted more than 2 Liz Trusses. To be fair to him, but is the shortest serving French Prime Minister in my lifetime, certainly, just 3 months. He's ousted. I mean, he's lost his vote of confidence. Calls for Macron to resign. What do you make of all this? Because they are an important economic ally, security ally, but we are looking at their economy going down the toilet.
It's bigger than just France, because we have to remember that the German government has collapsed effectively as well, and they're going to go into elections next year. We've got the French going into election now. The French can't go into elections because they can't have another election for 12 months. So there's going to be an interim government that's going to come in. There's going to be further political turmoil across France. We're going to see political turmoil across Germany. Those are the 2 biggest economies in the EU. So the impact...
And they're both in basket case territory right now.
Yeah, definitely. So the impact that's going to have on the EU, and therefore whenever it comes to us doing trade with our largest trading partner, but also with Donald Trump coming in and putting additional pressure on the EU. EU countries have just agreed to go to 1.9% of GDP on defence. Now, lots of EU countries are nowhere near that, but the NATO members have signed up for a minimum of 2%. Trump's going to come in and go, sorry,
and
folks.
And quite rightly so as well.
Hitting people hard.
But also, we've got the small point, we actually, we do have a war in Europe, and we do have a war in the Middle East. In fact, we need to be, you know, paying attention to what's going on. And again, things come out of the blue. What happened in South Korea this week? No one, even the State Department in the US, had any idea. That could have gone into something completely different, the turmoil there. And it didn't, thank God, and democracy was safe. But that could have gone horribly wrong. These sort of things can happen. And I just don't think the West is prepared. And if they're all busy, you know, staring at their navels, doing nonsense resets and aren't resets and sounding 6 milestones, or trying to cobble the government together and planning for us to get poorer with higher energy costs and relying on, you know, the sun and the... I mean, you see any sun outside this window? Because I can't see any. I mean, the West is genuinely in such a bad state, and I just don't think any of our leaders have got a clue what to do. Meanwhile, you've got the Putins and the Xi Jinpings who are really, you know, frankly, getting their act together and are quite terrifying.
Today, a stormer coming down the steps of Boris Force One, as he liked to call it, waving his paper saying peace in our time.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely,
where we are
absolutely.
historically.
Well, we'll come back to the speech, come back to your calls, 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call to have your say on this Plan for Change speech. This is Talk, Home and Common Sense.
In my mind why I made the move, but partly it was Donald Trump's success, because in a way he's shown what the Conservative Party could have been.
Yes.
You know, he's built this very successful Republican Party that appeals to working class blue collar Americans who want immigration under control, who are unhappy about what their kids are being taught in schools.
To have enough money to have a decent standard of living.
Yeah, and what the Tories did after the Brexit vote is they could have controlled immigration, they could have kept taxes down.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:26 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Plenty from Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Question is there going to be a common sense talk by Keir Starmer? He's already made a dig at Kemi Badenoch in his Pinewood studio speech. Of course, that's where they're speaking in Buckinghamshire today. This big, not a reset, not a relaunch speech with his 6 missions. And Keir Starmer has said, I'll try and set more digitally than he did. If you work a couple of shifts at McDonald's, then you can be working class, because, of course, that's one of her lines. By that logic, if I keep coming back here, I can be the next James Bond. Cue laughter. He's also said that, I hate it when politicians do this. Make no mistake, he said. Make no mistake. These 6 missions are going to land on the desks of Whitehall with a thud, he said. With a thud. As a gauntlet thrown down. And the weight of these missions. It's all very well, but apparently he's already watered down his clean energy pledge. Well, that's probably a good thing. He unveiled his plan for change. The document revealed the promise to deliver clean power by 2030 has been diluted, saying the UK will be on track to at least 95% clean power by 2030. Well, it was 100% clean power by 2030 last time round. It's going to be that 60% clean energy when they actually get to the reality. If they've already watered it down, I find that encouraging. That means to me they've actually looked at some of the facts and are paying attention to, reality. Yeah. So that's a good thing. But there we are. Let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000 are on these pledges, which, by the way, are not going to include any pledges when it comes to cutting immigration, either illegal or legal. Let's go to the phones. And Ray, who is in Colchester. Hello, Ray.
Yes, hello there.
Hello.
What a time to be alive after listening to his oh-so-slow countdown the other day.
4,
on the lights.
3...
the rubbish that he's coming out with today. I never had any expectations of this government. They were only in because they weren't the Tories.
Yep.
But in this short period, they've managed to exceed my absolutely zero expectations and have done remarkably worse than even I thought they could ever
It's
be.
mind-blowing. You are not the first person to say that, and you won't be the last.
No.
It is mind-blowing. And it's not just that they're bad at policy and actual specifics, like budget. They're really bad at selling their story and communicating, and they don't speak human.
Well, listen, any party where we've ended up with David Lammy as our Foreign Secretary, oh my God, yeah. Anyway, listen, earlier on you had I shall say an apologist for Labour on redefining words such as illegal immigrants, call them,
irregular.
And the whole point of today's, let's call it what it is, it's a desperate relaunch of a failing government that has failed spectacularly. But once again, the elephant in the room is completely being ignored, and that is the unrestricted mass immigration where 750,000 net increase last year, of which, and I keep hearing from no, they're all here to do all the jobs that we won't do. Only 20% of those actually had jobs to go to.
Yeah.
The cost of this is bankrupting us. It is affecting every aspect of our lives.
Yeah. Well, the NHS, but when these missions about, seeing a doctor within 4 months and the NHS and building more homes. Yeah, well, a lot of that is impact. Look, the last time I was off work, I had an allergic reaction. I'm sitting in my local A&E. I'm going to, from the people I could hear speaking to doctors, I'm going to guess 2 or 3 people in that very crowded room actually spoke English as a first language.
We are... Listen, everything else is, it's just PR, because I've come to the conclusion, I've always voted Conservative. I didn't vote for them this time because they stopped being Conservative. My hope is that this party, the non-Labour Party, because you can see that from their initial actions on who they hit on all the various taxes and removing various things, they're certainly not the Labour Party of old.
No.
My hope is they will destroy themselves just like the Conservatives did. Because the thing that is going to destroy the completely moribund, absolutely unrepresentative political parties we have is mass immigration.
Yeah.
It affects every aspect. And I'm afraid there's only one party that is talking about it in any way to actually mean that they're going to do anything about it. And my hope is the Conservatives, they're gone. The Labour will destroy themselves. They're doing a fine job of it, and long may I wish for them to continue doing so. Their whole obsession with ignoring the elephant in the room, while at the same time leading us down to a path where, we are going to rely on solar.
Yeah, I mean,
winter.
We're going to have power cuts. It's really that simple. It really is. By the way, the Prime Minister has said that his plan is going to put the country first, party second. He makes no apologies for sticking to our plan. I mean, yeah, well, again, you're not the first, they're not the last. I mean, it's just how terrible this state of things is. My only worry about this, though, I have to say, Ray, is that, I really care about my country, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I can pay my bills. There are an awful lot of people who are really, really struggling. The more this government fails, as the last government failed, the more people are going to be in dire straits. And we need people's lives to be better. Governments used to get elected with a plan to make people's lives better.
Well, unfortunately, we no longer have the parties that we thought we had. They have a different agenda to what we had.
Yeah,
and I'm afraid I've come to the conclusion the lights are going to have to go out. We are going to have the lights going out and all the rest of it before reality, which will hit these completely unrepresented lunatics full in the face.
Absolutely.
And it's going to have to happen, I'm afraid.
I couldn't agree with you more. Fantastic call, Ray. Thank you very much indeed. Philip nodding along to that as well.
Oh, very much so. And I think, Keir Starmer's choice of location for launching...
Yeah, everything about this.
And the analogy with James Bond's interesting, because if you look at the other movies that were made there, Star Wars, he's clearly on another planet. Yeah. Harry Potter, is he the Voldemort for the UK? Or he who should not be named. Of course, James Bond, but actually, in reality, one of the biggest franchises that was there was Carry On. The Carry On feeling.
Fantastic. I love it. This is why we have you here. Let's go to Adrian, who's on the line in Perth. Hello, Adrian.
Hello, Julie. Nice to speak to you.
Lovely to have you on. What do you want to say about this, then?
Well, first of all, it's an honour to be speaking to the brewer. I've never done that before.
I'm getting a lot of love this week, and I've got to be honest with you, I've got a teenage daughter and a husband, so it creeps me out a bit. I don't get this at home.
Well, we all love you in our house.
Oh, you're very kind. What do you want to say, my love?
Just very, very succinctly, you said, what would we judge Labour on? And there's lots of things. I mean, the main one for me is the winter fuel. Yeah. I was in the chemist the other day. I live in Scotland. And there was a pensioner with a mental health problem, and she said, I'm living on about $15,000 a year. Yeah. And I can't afford to heat my house. And I thought, shame on government. And she was crying. And all I did was put my hand on hers, and she couldn't stop sobbing.
Oh,
and
God.
I came out and I thought, we're living in a caring country. And the other thing that gets me is the freebies, the immigration, lack of support for Israel, what they've done to the farmers and how they will pay other countries, how they're expecting this country to grow by increasing national insurance contributions, the employer
jobs tax.
No regard for the Chagos Islands at all. Strike deals give the money to their pals.
Yep.
Early release of prisoners, making the country unsafe. Poor communication. They'd never answer questions. It's always whataboutery. So if you say something, it's you've done it worse.
Yeah.
And the sheer grovelling to the EU, it just makes one to be sick.
Yeah.
And I didn't vote for net zero. And I think it's hypocrisy that we can import fuel from other countries.
Yeah.
We will be the good green ones, but bankrupt ourselves in the meantime.
Yeah.
Lack of defence, and most of all, I want somebody who knows what a woman is, and it's not somebody with a penis.
I mean, I think you covered it all there, Adrian. What can I say? Well, I mean, fabulous. I tell you what, high bar on the calls today, folks. Adrian, really appreciate that. Thank you very much. You say you like me in my house. I'm loving you in my house too. Adrian, thank you very much indeed. 11:35 is the time. Just before we go to a break, we go to another topic. In fact, one of the topics that's actually in the news as well today. But Keir Starmer said clearing the asylum backlog and returning to people to their original countries who have their claims rejected would be, he says, a much more meaningful deterrent to small boat crossings than the Tories' Rwanda policy that he scrapped. He said that Asylum returns are now up 53%, but of course there's still a tiny percentage of those who are here. He accused the Tories of spraying taxpayers' money up the wall on the deportation plan. I think it was 700 million quid, and no one actually was forcibly deported at all. I mean, he's right on that, to be fair, but come on, that's not going to tackle the real issue. Coming up, I say we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk to a former police sergeant about the idea of this Bobby's on the beat, your local named neighbourhood police officer, and also police working from home while they're investigating child abuse and sex offender cases. How on earth can that possibly happen? Well, that's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:39 is the time. Keir Starmer is still speaking his big set-piece speech at Pinewood Studios, of all places. Mr. In touch with the common man and woman, of course, announcing his 6 milestones for the next election. Do give us a call, let me know what you think, especially about the fact that he's not giving any milestone, any mission, any target, goal, whatever you want to call them this week. Not a reset, not a relaunch. Do not use that sort of language, but not including anything on immigration, although he has said that returns of foreign national offenders are up 29%. That his government is on track to achieve the highest number of returns in 6 years. That's because there was barely anyone returned in the last few years, and there still aren't enough. And by the way, all foreign national offenders should be returned to their country. Full stop, end of, nothing to discuss. I don't understand why people are even questioning that, but there we are. Let's talk right now about one of the missions, and also another big story in the news as well about working from home officers, with Harry Tanguy, who's a former police sergeant and joins us now. Good morning to you, Harry.
Good morning. There's a lot of love for you in this household as well, Julia. Thank you.
It's all getting very strange. Genuinely, I do not live in a house where people are this nice to each other. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Harry. Now, look, 2 stories I want to talk to you about. In particular, one of these missions, which is about having this sort of effectively named local police officer. Bobby's on the beat. We're told 13,000 more police officers, special constables and PCSOs. So they're not all new police officers. About half of them are police officers, but half of of those were already going to be recruited already, so it's only an extra 3,000 new police officers. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary and former Tory police minister, has pointed out. But there'd actually be someone named, you'll be able to look up, it's John Bloggs. He's the local PC that I contact if I've got a problem. Is this doable? Is this achievable? Will it work? Will it cut crime?
Well, it's happening now. So I'm just looking at the Newquay website. There's one inspector, Steve Johnson, Ian Uyghur, the sergeant. Then there's 4 police constables, 3 PCSOs. They're all there. I've checked various other areas. I'm sure we're not the only...
So it's the norm already?
Yeah, so best, isn't it? And usually with College of Policing, what happens in one force happens in other forces. It's that you do get a national approach.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there's some small print to this that makes it slightly different. And remember that special constables are volunteers, and they're leaving in their droves because, quite frankly, they're very badly treated whilst they are working. They're left to their own devices, have poor supervision.
Yeah.
And they get the same overzealous disciplinary regulations as everyone else. And they say, do you know what, I don't need this.
It's not worth it, yeah. That's fair enough. So this isn't really going to be a game changer. And what about the bobbies on the beat thing? Because we know that's what the public want. We know people feel very reassured to have had police on the street. I would have thought it's rather obvious that police officers on the street who know the local police, know local shop owners and regular people, and they can garner information. Oh, no, he lives down there. No, that's the guy you want to catch. He was the one who was shoplifting yesterday or whatever. That actually would be quite useful. Does bobbies on the beat actually cut crime?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we are different from Dixon to Dock Green days. I mean, I really enjoyed a bit of foot patrol away from the telephone, and people do come up to you and they mention something that's happened down the road, and Billy Bloggs, who's up to no good, they wouldn't have come into a police station otherwise. So it's really important. But there were many times where people would go on the patrol and they say, I'm sorry, we've run out of jobs. Can you get into a car and answer those immediate? So they are fire brigade policing. They're putting out fires as opposed to...
but maybe those fires wouldn't have been set if a police officer had been in the street. I mean,
undoubtedly.
Well, one of the things I find frustrating to my local area, again, bag thefts and things, but I mean, on a mass scale, and phone thefts, but also... The bane. I mean, I'm lucky enough to live in a nice area, but it's like the cycling, but really fast cycling on the pavement, the littering, all the mess and everything. And then you get police officers, and every now and then, like once every 4 months, 2 or 3 of them in their high-vis vests will stand there. So we're stopping the people cycling. You think, well, well, what a surprise. They're not cycling on the pavement in front of you. What you should do is be in plain clothes, filming them all, and then someone round the corner is in the high-vis who then catches them all. And so they'll always think that they might be caught. I mean, I'm thinking, I'm not a police officer who's trained, but I'm thinking this is basic 101 policing, no?
Yeah, exactly. And the problem you have, and I found it in my 30 years, the wheel would go round. There'd be a big drive to get rid of bureaucracy. That releases us to get on the streets. Yeah. And it happens for, 2 or 3 weeks. And then somebody puts in I need this form and this form before I accept a file. Yeah. And therefore, you've got to go on a training course. And then we're suddenly back to more paperwork than we had before. There was a file called an abbreviated file. That was the bare minimum, just to see if there was a case to take it to court or not. When you knew you had a loser, but you needed an adult to check it. Yeah. That abbreviated file pretty much took on the same role as a full file in the end. Yeah. Because
and how many pages? And that's presumably a statement from the officer, the witness statement, the evidence folder. How long would that take? Like, I gave you the example again of my simple basic bag theft, some CCTV, got the name of the guy who's the suspect, blah, 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 my statement. How many pages would that be, and how long would that take to put together for an officer?
Well, if you get a suspect and you do an interview, then you're talking probably a couple of whole shifts, because you think you've done the job, then you've got to get all the you've got to edit all the police logs so that one is disclosable for court. Then you've got to do disclosure. Remember, we had problems with disclosure and officers not disclosing everything. That can take as long as the file itself. Right. Because this whole disclosure is not read by anyone at the court. But if it's not there or something's missing, you'll lose the case.
The whole thing falls apart. So it's sort of a 1-minute criminal act, massive admin for me and cost to me, but basically looking at probably a week of police time, even if the evidence is all there.
Well, pretty much, involving everyone. Counted up all the hours. Yeah. And one little shoplifting, you could tell, one little shoplifting, they can take the longest because you've got various shops involved. You're going to need to get evidence from each one. You've got to exhibit them. You've then got to search the guy's house if they're a big shoplifter and known previous to see if there's even more stuff. And then you've got to put this thing together. And, of course, they get a £25 fine, don't they?
Which is why they don't bother in the first place, and they know this. There you are. Well, again, I'm just feeling so uplifted by today's guests. I can't tell you. I mean, here's something else that's going to upset people, which is an audit of public job advertisements by the Telegraph has found that police forces are allowing staff who are investigating the most serious crimes going, sexual offences, including child sexual abuse, are being allowed to work from home, funded by the taxpayer. 42% of police staff jobs funded by the taxpayer are allowing home working. And we've already had social workers, I know, certainly lockdown almost, being allowed to work from home. I mean, a lot of people leaving the profession because you literally don't feel you can help anybody, and it's a godforsaken job as it is. At least you feel you're helping people in their homes. But you can't do these jobs from home, can you?
Well, I think a lot of it can. My girlfriend she was working the paedophile unit in Newcastle in Northumbria, and it was only 6 months she could take of it. So you got the mental health side of things. Whether they're looking at videos to assess criminal offences or not is one thing, or whether they're dealing with the outskirts of it, the preliminary stuff, the file preparation maybe, or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. It has the obvious risks, because even though checks can be made to know who you live with, and automatic ones are who you live with, who your friends are, who your relatives are, you don't know who's walking through the door either. Yeah. So I think it only take a couple of really bad publicity incidents of data being released publicly or whatever for it to go wrong. But generally speaking, I mean, I worked on COVID. I worked on G7 when I just left the police. I was called back to work 6 weeks. I'd never worked G7? Hard. Sorry, G7 was the Carbis Bay, summit. Yeah. Yeah, big like COP.
Oh, right, you meant the summit, right? Okay, yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, apologies. And it was the one after G6. No, sorry, cheeky. But it was a lot. I've never worked so hard because it was on the phone mainly, liaising with Cornwall County Council, other police officers and whatever. And I was able to do also, people are able to, I mean, the reason I'm here is I've finished my career as such, was going to move on to something else, paid my mortgage, got divorced, usual thing, got a mother with dementia and heart failure. So it meant she needs 24 hours, 24/7. You can be in the house with her. Right. And I can be here, but pretty much she's asleep for most of the time during the day, So it allows people who are sick or people who are more immobile because they've got an injury, they can still do the full amount of work.
OK, all right, I'll be persuaded on that. I'll take your word on that. Harry Tanguy, I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Former police sergeant there, Harry Tanguy. Just going back to the Bobbers, this is exactly what you were saying, Philip, earlier, an announcement about sort of, named local police officer. But I've said, that actually you've got, most people have, if you look up your local police station where you live, they'll tell you the names of the people anyway.
Well, exactly. Exactly. And this is where, we're being misled again. The Prime Minister standing up and saying, a plan for change. Well, how can you change something to say we're going to bring this in when it's there already?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Keir Starmer is vowing to deliver change the public voted for. It's all just, Did we vote? Well, we voted for, as you were pointing out, Philip, we voted for change. We weren't quite sure what kind of change we've got. It's not been changed for the good so far. But there we are. I want to hear from you. What do you make of his missions, his targets, his reset? Is it a reset? What sort of reset would work? And why has he not mentioned immigration as one of his 6 missions? Not targets, not missions. Do get your calls in as soon as possible. Get you on air straight up after the break. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Putting her on trial again would mean that for the many months of that trial, indeed as soon as charges have been preferred, if I remember the law correctly, none of us will be able to say anything about it. Not just about that case, but anything we said about the case at all would break the sub judice rule and make us subject to contempt of court proceedings and quite serious penalties. So it would silence what has become actually a very active debate, quite dangerous, it seems to me, to the prosecution. So whether that's the intended effect or not, I have no idea.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and of course Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. More on Keir Starmer's speech. Philip, actually, in the break, corrected me. I was talking about missions. Well, they're milestones. 6 milestones. I cannot keep up. I did not get the correct memo. Not targets, not aims, not steps. They are milestones, not missions, that he wants us to be judging him on come 2029. Something else that quite a wide-ranging speech that Keir Starmer has had to say at his speech at Pinewood Studios. Too many civil servants, he said, are comfortable with existing in a system built on managed decline. The Prime Minister said, I don't think there is a swamp to be drained here, but I do think that too many people in Whitehall are comfortable in the tepid bath of managed decline. Yeah, and they all voted Labour, mate. They voted for you because they thought they'd have a nice soft touch time and they could still, basically decide all government policy. I mean, the thing is, an awful lot of those people are the people in the senior levels. Mm-hmm. And you just pointed that the guy who's been the managed decline of the NHS is now the senior cabinet cabinet civil servant. I mean, doesn't bode well, does it? Anyway, let's go to your calls, 0344 499 1000. Paul is in Devon and wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, Julia.
Where do you want to start? Come on.
Where do I want to start? Right. Keir Starmer and his milestones. The word milestone is a term for measurement. I don't think Keir Starmer is going to get 6 feet yet. 6 milestones off the hip here.
Yeah.
This man, I don't think understands, or he does understand, but he refuses to listen. Now, the biggest thing, obviously, as you've mentioned this morning, and Mike before you and other presenters, is the state of the immigration, which is basically dragging this country down and breaking it up.
Yeah.
We find that he will not address that. He will come up with gimmicks like 6 milestones.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Mike previous to you and the Labour Party advisor saying that we're going to have named policemen. Now, this brings me back to other political gimmicks like named nurse and named teacher, which they brought out of the bag to try and deflect you from the real problems that are happening to us.
Yeah.
It seems that Starmer and the Labour Party, they may well be in office, but I don't think they are in control. I think that somebody else is running the show here.
Well, an awful lot of the advisors, actually, are people who did work for Tony Blair. A lot of those people come back out of some of the ministers as well.
Exactly.
Now, you come back to the immigration issue. See, look, I don't think you can solve a lot of our problems without tackling the immigration issue in terms of the extra burden on public services and the impact on wages and the like, and the impact on our shared culture. And the values that this society has. But I don't think it's the only problem. I think the real problem in this country is the people who've been in charge for a very long time. I mean, I think it's a homegrown problem, not an imported problem.
You find that with the politicians, whether it be local or national, when you go to vote in an election, it's not actually electing a new government. It's basically passing the baton. It's like a relay race. You find that nothing changes for us. They all preach change. What we really need is stability. And,
well, I don't want stability where we are now. I want growth. Government should be saying, we're going to make your lives better.
Well, they can't, because they're not actually listening to what is going on the shop floor, which is in the street or in the pub or in the cafe or when you're in work. And you get a completely different conversation and completely different attitude to what these people are. And this is what makes me think that these people are thinking or listening and being driven by other people. And probably one thing I will say that we need to be mindful of, you bring up the Thunderbirds countdown and associate that with Mr. Starmer. Now, I would caution that, you know, although the country is in deep trouble and we probably would be able or be very beneficial to call international rescue, but if you now call international these days, you won't get Jeff, Alan or Virgil, you'll get David Miliband.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I'm going to have to leave it there, Paul, because time's against us. Thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. I'm going to squeeze in one last call before this top of the hour. Gareth is in Lincolnshire. And Gareth, you want to talk about what we discussed with our former police sergeant, Harry Tangi, these police working from home on really, you know, on sex abuse and child abuse cases.
Yeah, I do. It just sort of rang a very loud alarm bell in my head because I work in an industry that in shop fitting, and a lot of our clients have digilocks on the door, they have electronic locks on doors. Any room that contains information, you need that key to get in.
Really?
Yeah, and so my question is, if you're working from home on a child sex abuse case and you decide to go make a cup of tea or go to the lavatory, your neighbour comes round, that computer could potentially be left wide open with information on it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, how do the managers have oversight
of what you're
if
doing?
You're working from home.
That's the thing. I mean, I've got so many concerns about it. I really do. But again, you know, Harry Tangi pointing out, you know, some people wouldn't be able to do this job. But again, yeah, there must be a better way. Gareth, thank you for that call. Appreciate that. Philip Ingram, I mean, you work in military intelligence. That's got to be a concern. It
is a concern, and this is where you bring procedures in, limit what you can do, and you can get software that can monitor what people are doing on their home computers.
Oh, you can, right.
And employers can do that, but I don't think the police do.
No, indeed. OK, well, anyway, it's an interesting point, but thank you very much for that call, Gareth, and indeed Paul as well. Coming up, we're going to take an update on the news. We'll find out more about what Keir Starmer said about his 6 milestones. I'll try and use the correct word. We're also going to be talking to the brilliant, the wonderful Craig McKinley, now Lord McKinley, about all of this and what those milestones should be. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
common sense. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer and you are with Talk on DAB Plus on YouTube. We're, of course, on your connected device and, of course, on your smart speaker as well. So whether you're watching or listening, it's great to have your company. Still joined by Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. And we're still talking about, yes, we are, Keir Starmer and this pledge. He's still making a speech at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, and he's pledging to meet 6 milestones in his plan for change speech. This is not a reset. It's not a relaunch. Stop saying that, everybody. That's not what it is. Everything's going just fine for the last 5 months, and in no way does he need to make some new announcements. Crucially, these are not 5 missions. That's what we had before the election in the manifesto. They're not the 6 first steps he announced after the first election. They are now 6 milestones. 5 months in, and also 3 foundations, just to throw that in for good measure. But anyway, they include things like raising living standards, not by how much, we don't know, cutting NHS waiting lists, but I mean, you're still waiting 4 months. 4 months for a referral to a GP, sorry, from a GP to a consultant. Building 1.5 million new homes. It's exactly the same pledge that Tories had in the last election, and one before that. They didn't build enough of them. Also, 13,000 extra neighbourhood police in England and Wales, but it won't include a new pledge on immigration. Not even mentioned. No pledges on that at all. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, millions of severely obese patients are going to be denied getting weight loss jabs on the NHS. There's a warning from experts. They say that the failure to introduce the drugs quickly will drive up hospital waiting lists, because only the very fattest and the people with the biggest health problems will only be eligible to get this. Or I suppose, I mean, it's a mad idea. People could just eat less food. I don't know if anyone's thought of that, but it might work too. We're also going to go stateside and talk about the outgoing US President Joe Biden literally being Sleepy Joe, falling asleep. People are saying appearing to fall asleep. He's definitely asleep during a meeting with African leaders. Also going to get the latest on Trump's cabinet picks as they start falling by the wayside. And we're going to talk about another small victory for sanity and fairness in women's sport, as the LPGA, that's the Ladies Professional Golf Association, have now decided to ban men, funnily enough, men, from competing against women in competitions after a trans woman, i.e. a man, Hayley Davidson, came within 1 shot of qualifying for the US Women's Open in June. So we'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. And as I say, Philip Ingram is with me as well. Now, I understand we're having some issues on the technical side of things, so we may not be able to get your phone calls up in the next hour. We'll do our best if we can, but do keep those texts and tweets coming in, though, particularly about these 6 milestones, not missions, not targets, milestones, which we're going to judge the Prime Minister on the next election. What's your reaction to that? Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Text cost 1 standard network rate message. Philip Ingram, we're going to go to another guest in a few moments, but you and I have been talking about these milestones, talking about, the fact that, the Prime Minister feels the need to even do this at this time. The latest thing we've just got from his speech, because obviously not lucky for you and me, we're not watching and listening to it right now, but getting handed over the details. He said the reason why he's not talking about a migration target is he says he's asked why he could not commit to capping net migration to, say, tens of thousands a year, under 100,000. Remember that in 2010 from David Cameron? Simpler, happier times. He said he wouldn't be drawn on a numerical target and said, we're going to drive down migration, both legal and illegal. That will only be done with a serious plan. But he wouldn't put an arbitrary number on reducing net migration. So, yeah.
Or tell us what the plan is.
To be fair, is there any point?
No.
Yeah, is there any point in him giving a number? Because he's not going to achieve it anyway. But also, when he was asked about why there wasn't a mention of an immigration milestone, he said he would not provided voters with a single metric to measure this. He said the importance of border security is obvious and therefore did not need to be given its own milestone. He said milestones were additional things that came on top of the foundational things. Sorry, this is a joke. Sorry, milestones are additional things that came on top of the foundational things every government must do. And yet every government hasn't done it. But hold on a minute, things like real household disposable income should be pretty foundational, shouldn't it?
Well, exactly.
This is insane. Yeah.
But do you want further confusion coming out of it as well? Because Number 10 has just put a tweet out.
Brilliant.
And included a little graphic in it. And it's got missions and milestones.
Well, you can't have missions and milestones.
It's got missions and milestones in front of me from Number 10.
Someone got a thesaurus for their last birthday and they want to use it. It's mad. No, but here's the thing.
And they're all colourful.
Does any of this matter? Is anyone going to pay any attention to this And are they going to achieve any of it?
Well, it matters if they say how it's going to happen, and they're not doing that. Otherwise, it just becomes a soundbite, and you have to put numbers and dates and everything else in it for it to be measurable. So there's nothing in there.
This is a man who's done stuff in the military and understands about.
There's nothing in there that you can measure. So it's trying to.
There's going to be a 40-page document. It might have some detail in it.
It might have, yes. I'll look forward to scanning it as quickly as I possibly can.
I can't wait for you to come back to us on this.
And reading other people's analysis on it.
Indeed. Well, look, let's talk to my next guest now. He's Conservative peer Craig Mackinlay, now Lord Mackinlay, and joins us. Good afternoon to you.
Hi there, Julia.
Lovely to see you.
Can I start with saying I'm pretty annoyed with Talk TV because in advance of this this session, I actually watched that dirge for 25 minutes. I'd have had 25 minutes of my life back. But I got so bored. I ended up getting my phone out and sort of having a little sort of wade through Twitter because it might have been more exciting. And I'm glad I did. And I'll tell you why. And I'll give him credit for it. I came across Harry Cole's tweet, which made me laugh.
Yeah.
And it had, if you don't mind me reading it, 3 foundations, 5 missions, 6 milestones, 7 pillars of growth. And a wag put under that, 5 milliband power cuts.
Totally.
3 dodged questions, 2 empty promises, and a manifesto in the bin. So
well done, Harry Cole. Political editor of The Sun, by the way. Political editor of The Sun.
I didn't get much out of it, to be honest with you, but...
No, can I just point out, though, it's a good thing you did have a look at Twitter and that cheered you up, because otherwise I was worrying that they wouldn't be able to get you on the phone line because you'd been fast asleep because it was a Keir Starmer speech.
But we did, for those who like to get the bingo card out when Sir Keir Starmer, our dear PM, speaks, we did have Smash the Gangs. So if we say it enough, it might just happen, but I doubt there was anything or a plan that will move towards that. And of course, we did get fixing the foundations. And without fixing the foundations, it really wouldn't be a prime ministerial speech these days.
It really wouldn't. I mean, the thing about this, I don't know if anyone pays that much attention during an election because everyone knew that it was quite obvious that the numbers didn't add up, etc. That there weren't, and there was this whole mandate for change. But actually, of course, we didn't really know what the change would be. There really wasn't anything very substantive there. None of this is very substantive. And as, my military man, Philip Ingram, points out, unless you say how you're going to do it, what it's going to cost, when you're going to do it, by these sort of missions, targets, aims, milestones, call them what you want, they're fairly meaningless, aren't they?
Oh, completely meaningless. These were just sort of, wild ambitions with very little chance of getting them done, and no plan that I could perceive of actually achieving it. But my real worry is that we're going to get one of these every 150 days.
Yeah.
The popularity sinks even further for the PM and the Labour Party. What is now sitting at minus 32, which I think is a record. I think it took Tony Blair many years actually to get to any level of sort of people not being enthused with him. But no, this PM has got there very, very quickly, and every week brings another disaster. Yep. And we have yet to see, because don't forget, Julie, we haven't actually seen what that budget really means on the ground, because at the moment it's only a finance bill in the eye of the Chancellor. That hasn't actually landed. The NIC rate increases have not hit employers. Yep. You have not had the madness of the Deputy Prime Minister, not Pat McFadden, actually Angela Rayner, as we know, her employers' rights bill, where I think yesterday on the interview she couldn't actually find one business who supported it. These are going to be job-destroying measures. We're now going to live through the first winter of a Miliband madness on net zero, which will only get worse. So heaven knows where we're going to be come the spring. Probably going to be having another one of these sessions. Of course we are. It all sounds like Starling on a good day, doesn't it? Where we are going to produce 5,000 new tractors and have 1 million tons of new grain. Yeah. It had that written all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, and also, I always love how, especially the question and answer sessions afterwards, how tetchy the Prime Minister gets about anyone daring to question him. You get the impression that most of his career, no one's ever dared to actually ask him any questions. He sort of thinks he takes quite an offence at it.
He doesn't like questions very much at all. Now, the one thing, and I'm trying to give him credit somewhere. I do actually agree with the ambition on trying to get things built, trying to get infrastructure built.
I mean, you lot ballsed it up, didn't you? You lot were bleeding useless.
It's very rare that I actually these days say that we ran a fantastic government for the last 14 years, Julie. You know that. But If he thinks he can get infrastructure done on the back of the Climate Change Act, where activists go to the Supreme Court, which tends to uphold their requirements that just about everything you try and do will have a CO2 output attached to it, and therefore it can't be done. So I think he's kidding us, frankly. And what do you think the chances are? We ought to have a little national bingo, national lottery. How many of those 1.5 million new homes are going to actually be built in the next 4.5 years? I would say 700, 800,000.
Can I just say, though, you guys had the same pledge. 1.5 million in 5 years is 250,000 a year. That's what your lot pledged. Didn't build all of them. And a lot of that's down to a planning issue. But you guys you were scared off about doing the planning because you worried you would lose seats, but you lost them anyway, and people haven't had the new homes. The whole thing is, at the end of this, when we sit there and say this government is useless, everyone we speak to, whether it's the callers, my guests, all we do, on air and off air, say, I knew it would be bad. I didn't realise it would be this bad. But the general view at the time was when people didn't vote Tory, because there wasn't a big vote for Labour, it was people not voting Tory, either didn't vote or voted for Reform or an alternative. Basically, it was like, it can't be any worse than this useless lot. Oh, my God, it is.
And so rapidly as well. That's the thing. So very rapidly. No, I mean, you know my thoughts about some of the things that my party did in government. Yep. You could argue that the big pressure on housing is not assisted by the huge number of legal migrants. Forget the illegals, the legal migrants that we allowed in. And, you know, I don't bear direct responsibility, but I have a degree of sadness and shame that was on our watch, and I just do not understand how on earth that happened.
If they listened to you on net zero migration, lockdown, and the impact of that, on all the policies that we've been talking to you about for a number of years, Craig, then your government would probably have won another term in office.
It would have been better. I mean, it does make me laugh. Everyone's forgotten about the lockdown. We've forgotten about COVID. And even the Prime Minister then seems to have forgotten that. He's saying, oh, well, during the last Parliament, people's living standards didn't go up. Yeah. Well, no, they didn't go up because we had the economy closed down for nearly half the period. Yeah. And we spent £500 billion in support of the country, mainly borrowing. And I'm just guessing where most of that money went. It probably went, a lot of it went on new tellies on people's walls bought in China. So there wasn't much good came out of it. And then he sort of says, well, there was no increase in the last 5 years. His opposition wanted an earlier lockdown, deeper, and I wonder if we'd actually be out of it now.
No, exactly. And again, that's my thing, and that's why a lot of voters go on playing on all your houses. When he says he's not putting, he says an arbitrary number for reducing net migration, legal migration or illegal. I mean, he says he's going to smash the gangs, but he says there's no point in having something arbitrary. He just says you need a serious plan. We've been told the plan for dealing with the smuggling gangs. I'm not particularly hopeful personally. I think that the pull factors are too strong, that they won't really work. But there isn't a plan. The reality is Tories didn't really have a plan at getting legal migration down. Labour certainly don't. I mean, they are philosophically wedded to the idea of open borders to all intents and purposes. But can you be serious about improving people's living standards, which is, raising real household disposable income, his first milestone? Can you be serious about tackling waiting lists and building more homes for people, and things like that, if you are letting in 1 million new people a year?
Well, yeah, I don't see that the two can rub together. He accused us of having an open border plan in last week's speech, if you remember that one. But no, I don't have any confidence in it. I mean, you know my idea. I mean, let's just separate the illegals from the legals. They're two different things. Completely. The big discussion points, both of them. But the legal migration, I've always been fairly sanguine about numbers for students, because students can be an export. That's no great issue with that, if I'm really honest. I did have a great issue when you were then allowed to bring in your entire family, mums, dads, aunties, uncles, on the back of that. That seemed a little strange, because I don't know any other country that is so liberal about that. Latterly, we did close down that loophole, a pretty obvious one, you'd have thought.
Only when the public found out about it?
Well, yes, possibly. But I would say our number that we require of legal migration is, you do two things. You look at this skills gap, your proper skills gap, of people that have got unusual skills that our universities have not been able to create in the right numbers. They're the type of migration that we'd all agree with, the top level skills. And once you've done that, you look at your own domestic workforce for perhaps the lower level jobs. It cannot be right. We have 8 million people on a form of working age benefit. Yeah. We surely should have a benefit system that makes these people go to work. Yeah. If you don't want to go to work, that's fine, but I don't want to pay for it. Exactly. And once you've exhausted your work pool of your standard jobs, then and only then should you look at importing new people. So to me, that does go back to dear David Cameron's potentially tens of thousands. We didn't achieve it. I know Labour won't achieve it. But I'm sorry to say this is the issue of the day, because no matter if you're in a working man's club in Doncaster or a posh club in London, everybody is talking about it and everybody is sick to death of it. So please, Conservative Party, do something about it now. Be believed on it, or unfortunately, somebody else might.
Absolutely. Lord Craig McKinley, Conservative peer, thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram still with me. I said to Craig there, we've been talking to him for a long time. He's been a fantastic campaigner on virtually all things sane. He really has. I've always been of the view, if the government had listened more to him on these things, they wouldn't have been in the mess they were in when the Tories were in charge. I've got much less faith that the Labour Party will listen to any of that.
Well, I don't think they will listen at all, and it's good to hear him setting out the fact that he recognised that there were big issues in the last government, the Tory government. I just wish that those that are in opposition at the minute would admit they made mistakes much more openly.
Kemi Badenoch has kind of shied away from a bit of that, hasn't she?
She has, and I think if the Tories want a proper reset, they have to turn around and admit they got things badly wrong, and it's part of the Tories' fault for that Labour have come in at the moment.
Well, I mean, certainly on the immigration issue, so the Prime Minister has said, we are going to drive down migration, both legal and illegal. That will only be done with a serious plan, but he won't put an arbitrary number. But it's not arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary.
I mean, it might be arbitrary in terms of, between sort of, I don't know, whether it was, 120,000 or 130,000. I mean, that, okay, something in that region. But a ballpark, when you ask people, give me a ballpark of roughly how many people do you think we should import to the country? But also this idea, I still find it fascinating, this idea that, we don't have enough doctors. Well, OK, I know we can't magically train up, but can we have a deliberate policy that we train up 7,000, more medics every year? We have the places. We know we do, because we're charging Chinese and Indian and Nigerian students sort of 30, 40 grand a year to come and train in our medical schools. We have the places. Why don't we train our own people? They've got the grace. We spoke to a guest earlier, James. We do genuinely have enough people to train up who would be capable of being doctors, who've got I'm not saying a load of kids who can barely, spell biology. I'm talking about kids who are getting top grades, who are denied places at medical schools when foreign students do get in because they pay more. It's a deliberate policy to not skill our own nation up.
Or you make it easier for people to transfer from other careers into medicine and recognise elements of other degrees to give you quicker pathways to get the qualifications that are needed and get in there. And actually, some of the things that are coming out are mutually exclusive. To reduce the NHS waiting list, you're going to need huge numbers more staff to come in and deal with it. Where are they going to get that staff? It takes 7 years to train a doctor. It takes 3 years, 4 years to train a nurse. They're not going to achieve that in this Parliament.
No, exactly. And again, this is one of the reasons why no one does it. They give the quick fix of importing new people, but at the same time they go, we're going to build some more houses. Yeah, well, we need the new houses just for the new people.
It's all linked.
It's all linked, and we're all on this. We're on this sort of this little hamster wheel of madness, and it doesn't go anywhere good, is all I can say. 12:21 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Going to get some of your text messages and tweets coming in about that. We're also then going to be talking to Joe Bartosh of The Critic about a little moment of sanity in women's sport, and this time it's from ladies golf. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I don't think it's right that these players were forced to wear, will ever be forced to wear something that they don't want to wear. It's the infantilizing nature of this stuff that just gets under my skin, no end. And the FA just needs to butt out. If it really wants to start making an impact on LGBT communities, there are other ways to do it, and it involves things like, you know, community groups, young sports teams, and all this kind of stuff. Look, get on it on the grassroots level. But the idea that an armband is going to make an ounce of difference is that of a moron.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Philip Ingram's still with me. I'm delighted to be joined now by Joe Bartosh, who's the assistant editor at The Critic, to talk about a small, tiny little moment of sanity that we get in the trans madness, and we have to celebrate every single one of them. Joe Bartosh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Well, let's talk about this. So this is basically the golfers in the LPGA, the Ladies Professional Golf Association, and they have now decided to. It's not quite all men, but largely banning men from competing against women in their competitions. This after a trans-identified man, calling himself a trans woman, Hayley Davidson, came within one shot of qualifying for the US Women's Open in June. Tell us what happened there, and tell us how this process has come about.
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that we've had to have an entire, they had a specialist body, a panel which they commissioned to look into the eligibility of, men to compete in women's sports. And funnily enough, they found out that, men and women's bodies are different. It was partly as a result of a golfer who calls himself Hayley Davidson. And he very nearly won a major tournament last year. So this year, the LPGA and the US Open have got together and basically put forward a policy which means that the US Open will now, for women, the women's category will now only be, only those born as women will be eligible. Not that there's any other way to be a woman, or those who have, or indeed those who haven't been through male puberty.
Yeah, so the idea that people who've been transitioned before puberty, my worry is you're going to get a load of psychotic parents who are going to push this, but it certainly would be illegal in this country. But if you've gone through male puberty, you have all the benefits. This boys and girls are pretty equally, can compete pretty equally up to the age of about 9 or 10. Once you've got male puberty, the testosterone, the muscle mass, the physical makeup of the men's body, the boys' bodies, it completely changes, and that advantage is there forever for all men. End of.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and that's essentially what the policy has recognised. Which
couldn't they just have said, if you're a man, you can't. Forget what it says in a piece of paper. You are or you aren't a man or woman. You and I know what they are. You are. Apparently, everyone's very confused about it. The Olympics are confused about it. We've had this issue over the BBC thinking that it's appropriate to put a man, when somebody is biologically male, on a women's Footballer of the Year competition shortlist. I mean, people seem to be very confused, and everyone started using terms like male and female, or born female, or biologically female. All of this, we've basically ceded the word woman. We have given away that word to men. It's our word. It's about us. We should only use the word woman. You know what I mean by it. I know what I mean by it. My audience know what they mean by it. I mean, and yet we've given it away.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? And I mean, once you sort of lose the power of language and naming and all those really fundamental things, communication itself becomes very difficult. I mean, with relation to this particular case, I know he's gone on sort of social media and he seems sort of very angry about this, but ultimately he can still compete in sport. he can compete in the males category. I mean,
well, this is the thing, because actually our headline, we'll just put the picture of Hayley Davidson back up again, because we have this sort of headline, these shortened versions of headline, trans ban. And this is the thing, we often have trans-identified males, they're men, they're athletes, who say, this is awful, we're being banned from sport. No, you're not. You can compete in your own sex category because you're a man. And if you can call yourself trans, by definition, you know that you were born a man, so you know that's the category you should be competing in. And whether it's running or weightlifting or boxing or golfing, of course it makes a difference if you're a man or woman. We don't know. He's a big, strong man. He's taller, he's stronger, he can hit further. He's got, longer arms and legs. I mean, of course he's going to be able to win tournaments competing against women who are biologically not men.
Yes, quite. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. It's about, I think, imagining that men and women can compete on an even playing field is almost like, imagining a man can give birth. It's
well, no, there are lots of mad lunatics who think that's possible too. But again, but how did this come about? Because we're seeing this sort of sport by sport by sport where actually a lot of these changes, they're basically this is just sneaked in, and then trans people are allowed to compete in the wrong sex category. Women start losing out. A lot of women now speaking up. But it seems to me most of the times when this comes about, these changes come about in these individual sports bodies, is actually when the women say, nah, we're done with this. Enough is enough. We all wanted to be kind, we wanted to be nice, we didn't want anyone to call us a bigot or a transphobe, but actually this is unfair, it's unreasonable, and in the case of, say, boxing, it's dangerous for women as well, and so we're not going to play anymore. We quite, in some cases, women literally saying, we won't play, we won't compete with someone like that. It's taken women to stand up and say to these bodies, often, by the way, a lot of these bodies run by men, and frankly lunatic women who've been captured by this ideology, that they just won't put up with it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, with this case, I know there were 275 female golfers who signed a letter in protest about Hayley Davidson being allowed to compete. So it's not as if there hasn't been a significant grassroots push against this for a long time. And I know that the policy of allowing men to compete alongside women was only actually introduced in 2010 because they had a legal challenge, funnily enough, the details of which I'm not clear on. But it does seem very likely that this would have been sort of, a trans lobby group or some such pushing, basically. Finally we are having sort of grassroots women being able to push back.
When do you think this is all going to stop? When is the madness going to stop? Are we on the right trajectory? I mean, Donald Trump's election, and him taking office in January, look, there are lots of things I've got an issue with him on, but not on this one. He's pretty clear on a lot of this stuff. This can be sort of stopped overnight simply by government refusing funding for anybody, any organisation and anybody that does this, all schools and the like, universities, everything. Do you have hope that actually, even though it will be a blunt instrument, this is what is needed? Because the ideology is now so entrenched in America, so entrenched in Britain, in every international body, public service, private sector, that actually we're going to need to basically, bludgeon it out.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing on this for nearly a decade now. And, every sort of 6 months or so, I'll sort of, something will happen, like, whether it was Ilsa Bryson, the sort of male rapist in a women's prison, or whatever it happens to be, I always think that must be it. This must wake people up.
Wake up, everyone,
Yeah, and oddly, it never quite seems to. I do feel like we are sort of making progress, and perhaps those on the left, particularly the Democrats in the US, are starting to realise that there isn't political capital to be gained out of pushing this nonsense anymore.
I don't think they do realise. I don't think that's the lesson they've learned at all. I think they should double down. That's the terrifying thing. But, I mean, this government, we've got a Prime Minister who doesn't even know whether all women do or don't have a penis, which I still find terrifying. By the way, we haven't done this for a week. Ladies, should we do our little weekly check for whether or not we've grown our penis? No? Still haven't got one. Still haven't got one. I mean, it's just weird. You'd think by now it would have happened, wouldn't you? But do you think that we might see more bodies standing up? And as people sort of thought there's going to be this backlash, you're going to be punished. But actually, when this stuff is cheered on by the average man and woman in the street, and when there isn't a big backlash, because actually, if you stand firm against this stuff, and say, look, you're perfectly welcome to compete. You're just not competing against women because you're not a woman. That actually more and more sports bodies, more and more organisations will begin to be a bit braver.
Yeah, I do think the more people speak out, the sort of easier it becomes. I also think the more people realise that this isn't a sort of, delicate, marginalised group. Quite often these are men with a fetish, quite frankly. And I think sort of getting those sorts of things out in the open will galvanise
And again,
resistance.
that's something people don't like to talk about, but actually a lot of the case this is, and there's also, and again, and a lot of very average male athletes who just want a chance to win something, and they know that's the category. I don't know why we don't just let them compete in, the under-15s football. Why don't they just go and beat those kids instead? I mean, but that's the same difference, isn't it? Joe Bardridge, always good to talk to you, assistant editor of The Critic. Has been a fine campaigner on this. Philip Ingram, I mean, look, you're in the military. One of the things that Donald Trump is talking about is removing every trans soldier from the military, including from very senior figures in the American military. I feel uncomfortable about that. I don't want people remove. I don't care whether you call yourself Sheila if you were born Gary. I don't care. I care if you're in a changing and making other women feel uncomfortable or things like that, or other than that, or if there's unfairness, it's unsafe for women. Other than that, I just think people should be allowed to live their lives as they choose. But what do you make of what Donald Trump wants to do on that front?
Well, I think Donald Trump removing people from the military who have got a full career and are still contributing and will have experience is wrong. That's a step too far. You should be able to accept people however they are, but you should recognise, and I never thought I'd ever see golf leading the way in sport, but you should recognise what golf's doing. That there are effectively two sexes, men and women.
Not effectively, there just are.
Yeah. Men and women.
That's the thing in the military, you have to deal with facts. But I find it very worrying that, there's so many in the military who don't deal with basic facts. But I don't think one needs to go as far as Donald Trump. I would say that is transphobic, because we did have this policy for years about gay people. The idea that gay people couldn't serve in the military, and was it no, don't ask, don't tell policy?
Well, America don't ask, don't tell. In the UK, it was illegal, and people were left with
hounded out.
They were not just hounded out; some were left with actual criminal records.
Yeah.
And then before that, women were thrown out of the military for getting pregnant. So the military tends to be years behind where society is. But then it tends to adopt everything a little bit too much. Donald Trump's sort of getting his policies wrong on it, but I think he's sending a strong message out to people.
That is very interesting to hear that perspective. Philip Ingram, thank you very much. Up next, we are going to talk about fat jabs on the NHS, except not for everyone on the NHS, just a few people on the NHS because of the huge cost to everyone else in society and a huge imposition on the NHS and all their services if you do start handing out free fat jabs to anyone who wants them. We're going to talk about that up next with a man who's quite keen on evidence, and that's the Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at University of Oxford, Carl Henningham. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. Philip Ingram's still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and we're joined right now, I'm delighted to say, by Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford, to talk about the latest big story about fat jabs on the NHS. Good afternoon to you, Carl.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. Right, so we've heard all about these fat jabs and how good they all are, the Wegovy, the goodness knows the whatever. It is the Manjaro that's been approved by NICE for the NHS to give, and this is supposed to be the most successful fat jab and make a real difference, game changer for people who've been severely obese for many years, got lots of other health problems. Wes Street, the health secretary, at one point was talking about, everyone who needs them could get them. They cost quite a lot of money, and it involves an awful lot of other extra work, counselling and help with diet and the things like that. And now we've had a ruling that actually NHS capacity means that even though 3.4 million adults are eligible technically for these free fat jabs on the NHS, actually only 220,000 of patients, fewer than 1 in 10, will actually be able to be given the drug over the next 3 years because of the spending constraints and the time constraints. Seem to be a lot of people who say this is awful. All these millions of people have been denied a weight loss jab on the NHS. But, I mean, last time you and I spoke, there seemed to be a big question mark about how well these jabs do actually work.
So I think you find Wes said he was going to give it to the unemployed, wasn't it? That was the secret to get everybody off benefits. So this is a drug tirzepatide. What it markets itself is because it's once weekly. For a month's cost, so that's 4 jabs, you have a quick pen, you can do it yourself, is about £122 for the NHS. So the first thing to realise, even if you just give it to this small number of people, it's going to cost, they reckon, about 320 million a year. My estimate is it will be more than 400 million a year. Now, if you wanted to give it to everybody, that's 10 times more, so it'd be about 4 billion. Remember, in the cost of the whole UK England drug budget is about 10.4 billion. So this could completely dwarf all of our drugs, and there'll be no money left for everything else. Now, remember, you have to exercise 150 minutes a week while you're on the drug. That was in the trial. Most people seemingly can't get out of bed these days, so the idea that you do 150 minutes of exercise, and you have to reduce your calorie count by 500 a day. Now, Julia, that to you might be a few drinks and a small...
That was unfair. That was a bit of a dig there.
So that will be the end of your Christmas, if you like. But look, this is key. This is a problem. I do think they have to go, does the trial translate into the real world?
Yeah.
We can't just roll this out. If you want to give, just imagine, if you want to give it to like 200,000 people, there's only 260 working days. So you're talking, by that quarter, you're talking 1,000 people a day you've got to get on the drug, and you've got to get the weight loss advice, the exercise.
Don't worry about the people worried about cancer. I wanted to be treated. Yeah, but the argument seems to always be, but we'll save the NHS loads of money, and all of these people are getting all these other problems because, of course, you've got diabetes, you've got more. If you're fatter, you're more likely to be having a risk of heart attack and of pretty much every cancer as well. So actually, it'll be a wonderful saving. It's an investment, Carl.
Yeah, so look, we have to admit we have a crisis in our obesity levels. I mean, if you look at overweight and obesity, by the time 45 to 75, we're talking 3/4 of us are in that zone. So we do have this crisis, but somehow what we're doing is there's a quick fix down the line. Yeah. And I suspect what will happen is here, whatever we've tried so far, the problem seems to be getting worse. This is a long-term plan that has to start from schools, coming right through from families to a change of direction. It is incredibly hard as you get older to lose weight. Yep. We all know that. But the quick fixes, the key here is, if you're not losing your weight and you haven't lost your weight, I'd have very stringent targets. You haven't lost 5% of your body weight within 3 months, stop the drug. It's not working. We're wasting our money.
And at the very least, you're not doing the changes in your diet and your lifestyle that will go on. I remember last time we spoke, you pointed out actually even on the trial conditions, even when people have been closely monitored, getting all the support on diet and lifestyle and exercise, that actually within a couple of years of people coming off a drug, and these drugs are only recommended for 2 years max, you can't stay on them forever. That's not good for you. They're not that good for you anyway, I would suggest. The side effects tend to be hidden, I think, by most of these pharmaceutical companies and their trial data. You come off it, if you don't keep up with the change in diet and lifestyle, you put the weight back on again anyway.
You're correct. So what they do in the modelling is say by 5 years you'll be back to where you were, because if you don't change all of these parameters, you only should have the drug for 2 years and then you've reached your target weight.
Yeah.
So what happens when you stop it? Well, most of these weight loss programs suffer from that problem. People rapidly put the weight on because they haven't changed their lifestyle.
Yeah.
This is not just an individual. Somehow we've got to work out as a society what is seriously going wrong here and how do we shift our behaviour.
But also, I mean, I have to say, I remember looking at the stats, and it was something like, on average, about weight that people lost on the trial conditions with all support, etc. That actually they were losing on average something like half a pound a week. And you're thinking, you could lose half a pound in a day, for goodness sake. I mean, it's just extraordinary. I mean, when I've done proper health kicks, I've managed to lose, I think one time I actually lost 7 pounds a week. I was doing a hell of a lot of exercise. I was eating. I've never done a crash diet, don't do any of that madness. But, you know, there was no carb, there was no sugar. It was just, you know, it was lean fish and veg and things. And I have to say, I mean, but, you know, half a stone a week, I was absolutely thrilled. The reality is that actually most of this weight loss could be done if people just did the diet, the lifestyle. But people are obsessed with it. I was at an event earlier this week, and so many people were talking about this. And there's so many journalists, so many politicians who've been using this. This is being pushed by everyone. But I always worry about anything where it's a sort of, you know, well, we're just going to take another pill. Everyone just take another pill, as opposed to adjusting the lifestyle things. But also, if you don't adjust the lifestyle and the diet, not only will you put the weight back on, but actually that also has a massive impact on things like mental health. Everyone's talking about mental health. Well, you know what? Eating healthily means you sleep better, means you've got the energy to do more, you go outside more, walking, you don't need to go to join a gym, physically just walking or cycling, whatever you want to do. But actually all of those things all tie in. And I got this idea that we're all just going to be sitting in a little pod, Matrix style, just popping pills, but that's the solution.
And we'll be online getting Deliveroo to deliver us more fast food and more calories. The number I have in my mind is about 3,000 calories. That's equivalent to about £1. So actually, if you reduce your calorie deficit 500 a day, that gets you to near 3,000. You can have a day off on Sunday, and basically you'll lose £1 a week. So that's right. But generally, what I say is it's very hard to lose weight with exercise, but you can get 100, 200 calories in that. And then you're looking at 200, 300 a day, sustainable over the long haul.
And you look and feel better. I mean, you know, you exercise, I just think the whole thing is just completely coming the wrong way. And again, at the same time, we've got a government saying they're going to ban us seeing adverts for food that we like. And that's somehow going to make the world better.
Whatever you do, always have a day off, enjoy yourself. Do not try and say, I'm going to have this life, which is miserable 7 days a week. You know, and so I think if you just be sensible, and this is what I would be fit at 50, and then you can sod 60, sorry about the language, but you basically want to be able to get a population who say, I'm going to start looking after myself. And then by the time I get to 60, I won't have all these chronic diseases. I'll be able to be out there enjoying myself.
Yeah, I genuinely, that's exactly what my husband and I did. Honestly, in my mid-40s, I went, right, got to get on top of this and stay that way. And it's the best thing I ever did. Best thing I've ever done.
And what about things like simple tax reductions for people who join gyms and use them and actually do the right thing?
Yeah, you'd actually have to use them.
That's the way you'd look at it.
Yeah, that would be more. I'm not in favour. Again, I think people should do it for their own good. You know, so you can actually meet your grandchildren, that sort of thing. Carl Hennigan, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed from the University of Oxford. Philip Ingram, your tuppence worth on this?
Well, too much common sense coming in there, and it is just do everything in moderation.
I know that's what all the people who die at sort of 160 in their last words are like, in moderation.
But I remember the debates in the 70s growing up. It was all the future's going to be, instead of eating, you just take this pill, and that's going to sort everything out.
Why would you want to?
Well, exactly. You know, enjoy the food, enjoy everything else. But if, you know, I will put the weight on, but I enjoy doing it. If I want to take the weight off, I'll cut down the food.
And I won't expect taxpayers to fund it.
Exactly.
There we are. 12:47 is the time. I wish the phone lines were working right now. They will be back on, I promise you, for the next show. But up next, we're going to be talking about stateside with Greg Swenson, chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, about quite literally sleepy Joe Biden falling asleep and what is going on with Trump's cabinet picks as well. This is Talk, a Home of Common Sense.
You're now turning into Keir Starmer. Look at the statistics. Well, walk down the street in London and you'll see what's going on. You will know that there is much more crime and people fearful of being assaulted than they've ever been in my lifetime.
No, you have to stick to facts, Mike.
Yes, I do stick to facts, but statistics aren't facts.
And I know people are afraid of crime, and
statistics are not facts, John.
But yes, they are facts. Crime is the lowest it's been.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart TV, on the app. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram still with me. Just get a couple more messages coming in about Keir Starmer's and his 6 milestones. Cindy says, Starmer and his crew need to go before we have no allies and no country. Wayne points out, until he addresses immigration, then nothing will change, it will just get worse. And Alan says, I don't believe a single word that Starmer says. He's a compulsive liar. And Benjamin says, of course he won't. Is as much in favour of the open borders experiment as the Tories. Damien says, 6 milestones. This is similar to Ed Miliband's promises written in stone, as well as Rishi's failed pledges. Will these politicians ever learn? Leslie says he's done nothing to improve working people's lives. He has no intention of doing so. Roger says if Starmer did make a promise to cut immigration, he would be lying the same as all his other promises. You're not feeling very positive about this, are you, folks? I'm wondering how positive you're feeling about Donald Trump's election. I know a lot of us were really very pleased and amused by his election result back in November. He's going to come into office in January. He's been making a lot of his cabinet picks. There's been some trouble with that, but I suppose at least Donald Trump's awake most of the time. That's quite a good thing, isn't it? Let's talk about all of this with Greg Swenson, Chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Good afternoon to you.
Great to see you, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get on to Trump's cabinet picks, let's talk about what's not happening on January the 20th, but what's actually happening right now. Latest video footage of Joe Biden on a trip meeting his he's in Angola. He's meeting his counterparts from Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Angolan president, obviously. Lots of copy in the newspaper says he appeared to fall asleep during a meeting, closing his eyes for more than a minute. I don't know if we've got the video, we can put it up, but genuinely, he's so obviously fast asleep in the middle of this meeting. I mean, I know he's elderly, but the idea that he stayed on this long, I know, thank God he didn't run to be the president again, but the man is clearly unfit for office.
Yeah, he's got obvious cognitive issues and completely unfit for office. But I would argue he was unfit for office in 2020. There's a reason he lost in 2008 and didn't poll over 5 points. Same with 1988 when he ran for president and got busted for plagiarism. I mean, Joe Biden overall was a very weak candidate. The only reason he won in 2020 is because he wasn't Donald Trump, and you had the COVID crisis going on.
By the way, while you're talking, if those of you are watching on YouTube, you'll see we've actually got the footage up of Joe Biden. But you might think these are still images. They're not. They're Joe Biden sitting there with his head in his hands, fast asleep on video, for goodness sake. And the papers are saying he appeared to fall asleep. I mean, there's not even honesty about it.
No, they're not. They're really dishonest about, anything about Biden, and then of course anything about Republicans or Republican candidates. And that bias isn't new, but it's become in the last 5 years, outright activism, not really bias anymore. So in many ways, Julia, it's sad to see, the old guy trying to hang on, but it also points to the mother of all cover-ups, that they all denied his cognitive issues until he wasn't polling well against Donald Trump in July, and they decided to ditch him. So, that cover up, there'll be books written about it.
I mean, the reality
it's really
is,
criminal.
The reality is, if me in my 50s, I'd with that jet lag, I'd probably struggle. Of course, I imagine they've got nice, comfortable beds on Air Force One. But he's an elderly man. But this is not a job for an elderly man. Donald Trump is only a few years younger than him, and we know, he goes to bed very early. He's not someone who's in the office, past sort of 5-6 p.m. in the evening. So there's other issues there. A lot of people think this is a 24/7 job. But let's talk about Donald Trump's cabinet picks, because he's already had a few fall by the wayside, hasn't he? And the latest to go by the wayside is his pick for, is it the Treasury?
No, the Treasury's Scott Bessent, who's super solid, and he'll get approved easily.
Pete, apologies. Yes, no, the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth. Yes.
Yeah, so is that breaking news, Julia? I'm sorry I didn't see that yet, but I know he was in Washington yesterday making the rounds in the Senate, and the media did a real hit job on Pete, in my opinion, because remember, he is a conservative, a well-known conservative, TV personality, and I think that was just unacceptable for most of the media in America. So it's really a shame. He's a likable guy. None of the rumors about him were confirmed, about any drinking or anything else. Those
there were some much more serious rumours about this guy in terms of his treatment of women. There's an email his own mother wrote to him, which we know is legit. She's commented on it, but she said, "You treat women appallingly. You're a bad person." She's now said, he's a great father.
He went through a difficult divorce, and I think, like in many families, the parents or his mother, at the very least, really liked his ex-wife. Those are personal and unpleasant things. But look, we just elected a president who's been married 3 times and has had his own issues. That's true. And the voters don't care. I mean,
they don't care. But there does seem to be a problem with some of the ethics of some of the people he's been suggesting, and even concerns among many Republicans in the Senate.
Well, I think that was the case with Matt Gaetz, where a lot of Republicans just don't like him, personally. So that was, I think, going to be a real challenge for Matt Gaetz. But everybody else, I mean, ethical questions, because Kash Patel called out the Russia collusion hoax, that was basically created and funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign. I mean, these were things that sounded like conspiracy theories at the time, but they all turned out to be true. Yeah. Just like COVID denial and the lab leak argument and the Hunter Biden laptop, So I think there's a lot of things that people are uncomfortable with, but that's why Trump was elected, to be uncomfortable, to be disruptive.
That is true. That is true. I just wonder if he can't find people who are disruptors, who can get stuff done, who perhaps don't have some question marks over there, should we say, their personal morality. I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. Really good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us, Greg Swenson, Chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Philip Ingram, final word on this?
Well, it's interesting. I think Trump's put a few fall guy characters up, and they are falling by the wayside. It's who's coming in after them.
Yeah, it's when you're in Republicans aren't keen, but again, the disruptors tend to get a lot of feedback, don't they?
Exactly.
Anyway, talking of disruptors, Ian Collins is here.
Yes.
Afternoon.
What's
going on?
Just checking the breaking news. Me Amazon Christmas paper plates have just arrived. So there you go.
He's coming and he's sat on his phone.
That's a really good bit of news.
No, I've got the lucky thing. My husband's a bit unwell, so all of my deliveries are all arriving very nicely.
They're all sorted.